I call this meeting of the Bloomington Board of Education to order. This is Monday, May 13th, and it's nice we have a break in the weather on a day when we also have a lot of guests we've invited to be here. So we'll try to get two things, and you're welcome to leave after whatever recognition is offered to you, and then we begin regular agenda. Two people often get up and move out, and if you have other plans for the evening, thanks for being here temporarily before getting on to the next thing. Would you please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the minutes show all members are present except for Director Mark Hibbs, and Director Hibbs has notified us he will be late, but he will be attending shortly. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval. Second.
A move and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. And we will move then to the recognition of students, staff, and public. And the first item, as we often do in our meetings, is to recognize friends of the Bloomington School District. We're fortunate to have businesses, organizations supporting our learners, and the community of Bloomington. In appreciation of these collaborative efforts, the school board recognizes our friend for this evening, the Sun Current newspapers, and Director Nellie Corman will make the presentation. Director Corman.
Thank you. Good evening. Sun Current Newspapers is the official legal newspaper for Bloomington Public Schools and has been for many years. The community looks to the Sun Current for local news and information about the district. From academics and athletics to fine arts and diversity day, peace run activities. The Sun Current is a source of information about its neighborhood public schools. Over the past years, Mike Gill, Senior Account Executive, has played a key role in arranging for sponsors to support our news highlights, Student Achievers of the Week during the school year, and the tabloid insert for our Senior Achievement Recognition Banquet. We are sorry that Mr. Gill cannot be with us tonight, but we would like to thank him and all the Sun Current staff. Mike Hans, reporter for the Bloomington Sun Current, is here with us tonight. Thank you.
Our next candidates for recognition are the Kennedy High School girls basketball team. The girls basketball team placed second in the state tournament, and activities director Chris Kranz from Kennedy High School will introduce Coach Quentin Johnson and our students. Director Kranz.
Chair Culver, school board members, and cabinet members, thanks for having us. I'm going to introduce Quentin Johnson, our first year coach this year. And as you heard, our girls basketball team did awesome. They not only won the South Suburban Conference, a very tough conference, but then qualified for the state tournament and placed second in state this year. And I do have to say thank you to our community and our student fans, because of any other school that was there in our class, we by far had more fans than anybody else. So that was really fun, great for the girls to feel supported. And I'll let Quentin Johnson talk a little bit more about the season.
Yeah, just to echo what Chris said, I want to thank everyone for coming out and supporting us down there at the Target Center. It was a great experience for all of us involved. You know, I was very happy for the players. They put in a lot of hard work this year, adapting to me as a first-year head coach after having different systems and so forth and all that. But, you know, through it all, one of the main things I'm proud about is that we had no academic problems, and actually they were very good students. You know, and that goes hand in hand with athletics, and it's kind of my philosophy as far as being a student athlete. It always comes first, and, you know, then we can work hard on the practice court and all that other stuff. Faced a little adversity this year with injuries and stuff like that, but we had, you know, some real good young kids that stepped up and really showed some maturity above their age for us to get there. Went through a 20-game winning streak, finished with a 28-4 overall record, a 17-1 conference record to win the South Suburban Conference all outright, which is an accomplishment itself because it's so competitive. But overall, I'm just so proud of them And I'm also proud of the community for coming out. They cheered us on with class and dignity, and we gave back to them, but we couldn't have done it without you guys. And we expect to make this, maybe get back there again next year and win it all. And we just want to thank you guys. And now I can introduce Kanisha Bell and E.C. Odora, our co-captains, who are going to be an integral part in us accomplishing that. And they got big college dreams coming in a couple years. So the credit always goes to the girls. So I'm going to give them a chance to say a few words to you guys. They're a little nervous too, so.
I just want to thank you guys for honoring us. It was a good experience going to state, and hopefully we can go next year. I want to thank you guys too for honoring us. A little about the season, we had a lot of people injured, and we came back and won the conference. The injury deals was kind of scary because sections was coming up, and we knew if we lost, we was done for the rest of the season. And for everybody to come back healthy and come back together and at least make it to state, we thought that was good, and we had a lot of fan support, and hopefully next year we can be back at it again and hopefully win.
I would like to invite Barbara Delahan, Coordinator of Elementary Gifted and Talented Programs, to come forward now. She will introduce recognition for some further accomplishments of elementary students.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting us this evening. I'm proud to represent the Gifted and Talented Department. That includes also Erin Boltic, our new director, and also Julie Donaldson, the middle school director, or coordinator of Gifted. The first one we're going to honor is Continental Math, and a little bit about, well, let me call up if Ingrid Anderson is here, I believe, and Jelaine Clark and Tracy Yang. Nope, so you're it, Ingrid. Okay, to tell you a little bit about Math Olympia, Continental Math, there were 320 teams across the United States. This is a math competition problem solving, and it involves 30 questions, 5 tests of 6 questions each, and they're very difficult, very difficult. So out of 320 teams, and teams could be a whole class, or a couple of classes, there were only 41 students in the United States who had perfect scores, and Ingrid was one of them. That she got a 30 out of 30, and so we'd also like to recognize her teacher, Kristen Trenery, and Jelaine's and Tracy's teacher was Teresa Campbell. And there's Tracy, come on up. Thank you for working so hard. Thank you. Okay, so the next one that we're going to honor is Colden. Would you come on up? This is the Ridgeview Elementary, also Mrs. Campbell's Dimensions Academy class, participated in Knowledge Open Masters. And this involved, actually, they came in first in the state, third in the nation, and Colden is representing his entire class. And is Christopher Melville here? Okay, he was supposed to come on up. So basically what they did for Knowledge Master Open is they were all one large team as a 5th grade class, and they had to answer 100 very challenging questions in a variety of subject areas, and they earned points for speed and accuracy. And Mrs. Campbell wanted to bring Colden up to acknowledge his leadership in that win, and so they did very well too, so congratulations. And another thing I'm always up here for is Destination Imagination. And would you kids come on up? So it's Isaac Kasahara, Paul Tim, Matt Steigoff, Zach George, Renee Safranek, Amy Lee, and Michelle Wang. And these kids the name of their team is the team that bribed me the most. And I have to tell you that every year I'm up here for Destination Imagination. And for the most part, it's been a team that is coached by Mrs. Sue Kasahara. Where are you? Right there. Every year. And Amy Steigoff has been also a coach with them for a couple of years also. This team has been together. They're 8th graders, right? 8th graders. They've been together since 3rd, for the most part. 4th? 1st? Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, they've been together a long time. And really good Destination Imagination for you new board members is a creative problem-solving competition. And they won at state, and they're going to globals in Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee, next weekend or the weekend after? Next weekend. So we wish them lots of luck, and I'm always so proud of how this is an after-school competition that they spend many, many, many hours, and they always choose a technical problem, and their solutions are just amazing. So we're very proud of them, too. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to recognize our successful students, and we'd also like to ask the parents of those students to stand so that the audience and the board can acknowledge their contribution to student success. If you'd rise, please. Come on. Up. Up, up, up. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here tonight. The next item on our agenda is a recognition of different students' anti-bullying presentations at Olson Elementary School. And I would like to call upon Principal Paul Meyer from Olson Elementary and Ahmed Khalifa to do introductions and present certificates. Please come forward. And Principal Stephen Hill from Jefferson High School is also joining us here at the front.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to come tonight. I'm standing here to talk about, to share about a program that Mr. Khalifa, a cultural liaison who happens to work at Olson Elementary, Olson Middle, and Jefferson, and he's done a wonderful job connecting the campuses, and one of the projects that he was working on involved these 4 Jefferson students. 2 of them happen to be ex-Olis as well. And last spring, Ahmed and I sat down and we said, I want to come up with some type of plan that's authentic and that could really involve our families and the kids and get it involved. And he was saying, what about if we did something around bullying? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. What are you thinking? So, long story short, Ahmed got the kids together, trained them. They came to a rally of ours and presented on an anti-bully message to the whole school. And then after that, they spent 4.5 hours in the classrooms presenting a 20-minute presentation using the PACER anti-bullying webpage. And one little anecdotal note, Ahmed mentioned to me that he had one of our first grade parents came up to him and said that the student came home, was really excited and wanted to thank him for the message because the child took it to heart. And the beautiful thing is that it comes from the children who are now young adults. So I want to say thank you for your hard work. I want to say thank you to Mr. Khalifa, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Khalifa.
Thank you. It's always wonderful when we see students that have the opportunity to take a theory and an idea and then apply that. And this was wonderful here. And it's wonderful to know that we have children who can stand and deliver. And that's exactly what these students did. It was a lot of work. We met for probably 7 or 8 hours. They had a lot of work to do at home. And not only make an 8-minute presentation in front of the entire school, students and staff, but go into the classroom, and they were on their own. I didn't maneuver, I didn't say, here, go here and talk to this teacher, etc. They went into each classroom, introduced themselves to the instructor, commandeered the computer, connected to the internet, and hooked that up to the smart board, and did a 20-minute presentation in front of that class. And it went bang, 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 bang for 4.5 hours without stopping. And so it was a wonderful job. And so we want to thank all of them, and I'll turn that over to Mr. Hill, and then we'll make these presentations. Thank you.
Thanks, Ahmed. And I just wanted to mention when students are talking to students about bullying, it's a really powerful statement that kids make and kids listen to. We adults in school, every school in Bloomington has got lots of adults that work really hard on anti-bullying and picking on and just misbehavior in school. And we work really hard on the policies and implementing things and communicating to kids and to parents. And a lot of adults spend a lot of time on that. And every school in Bloomington does a pretty good job with that. Across the state of Minnesota, every school works on this very same thing. Lots of information about bullying and programs to deal with being more respectful and building on positive things in schools have really taken hold in Minnesota, across the country, and so on. But the most powerful thing of all, no matter how much time we adults can spend talking to kids and talking to parents, is when kids are talking to kids. And these high school kids have done just a phenomenal job of going down to the elementary school and connecting with those students. And we really owe them, I think, a great round of applause. I'd like to ask if any of the students would like to make a couple comments.
There we go. Yeah.
I didn't have anything planned, so, but I just want to say thank you for acknowledging us. We just felt it was important to get the message across to the future of future kids, teenagers. I don't know what else to say. Thank you. That's.
Rachel Oyen. Thank you very much, Rachel. Celicia Berry. Thank you very much. DeAndre Malone Carlson. Thank you very much. And while we're giving this, it was very interesting when we introduced them, and this is Larry Canat. Larry, thank you. When we introduced them to the students at the high school, of course, I have nicknames for all of them, and the kids love them. Rachel we call Onion because her last name is Oyen. Celicia we call Silencia, usually because she's never silent, which is interesting tonight. Except for tonight. DeAndre we call, of course, Run DMC because that's his last name, DMC, which is his initials. And Larry we call him Flash because he runs track. And so when we introduced them in the auditorium, and then in the hallways, the kids would say, "Hey, Onion, hey, Flash, hey, DMC." So that really helped. So if they walk the halls of OLE, they'll be known by those nicknames to those students. So thank you all so very much for acknowledging them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And are any of the parents of those students who just were recognized present as well? We'd like to have you stand and be acknowledged. Parents, thank you. Thank you very much. You're doing a great job raising idealistic kids. Thank you. I'd like to call upon Eric Melby, Executive Director of Student Services, to introduce Dawn Steigoff, who is the chairman of the Special Education Community Advisory Committee for Caring Awards.
Chair Culver, Superintendent Fujitaki, board members, and public, thank you for having us here tonight for some recognition. I'm going to introduce Don in a second, but in the meantime, if I could have the CCAC Special Caring Awards winners that are here tonight, please come up and stand right here. Then you'll be up here when we recognize you. That would be great. Again, I'm Eric Melby, the Director of Student Services for the district, and I would like to introduce you to Don Steigoff. She is our chairperson of our CCAC Special Education Community Advisory Council this year, and Don's going to talk a little bit about the council and the awards.
Thank you, everyone, for inviting us and giving us a chance to recognize our award winners. The Special Advisory Council, its members are school staff, representative from the City of Bloomington, and parents. We advise the special ed director by reviewing policy, both the Department of Ed and district policy, looking at rules, regulations, anything that really would affect special education students in the district. The Caring Awards, when I first came on, joined this group, were originally only recognizing regular education classroom teachers. And I remember asking, well, but there's a lot of really great people in the school that also do wonderful things for special education students. Shouldn't we be recognizing them also? So we have, over the years, expanded it to anyone that would go above and beyond for a special education student. That can be anyone from a bus driver to the lunch lady to, we are so thrilled to this year have another student that was also recognized. These nominations are sent in by parents, often of the special education student, or by other staff in the building that recognize someone going above and beyond.
Thank you, Don. So at this point, I will recognize these folks, and when we have our banquet, which we have every April at the Holiday Inn up the road, we recognize all the nominees as well as the winners, and we generally read all of the letter of nomination that we get from either the staff person or the parent who's nominated these folks. They're long letters, so I've summarized for tonight. And I noticed that not everybody could make it here tonight. So we had close to 20 nominees this year. And we've got the 3 who are here with us tonight. Unfortunately, a couple of people couldn't make it. Amy Kaufman, who's a deaf, hard of hearing teacher in the district, she was nominated by a parent for the great work she's done. Nairi Grigsby is another student. We actually had 2 students who were recognized this year, 2 winners. And she's a 4th grader at Valley View Elementary who's done a lot of work with kids on the autism spectrum at Valley View. And Megan Dahlquist, who's a bus driver who works with kids with special needs, is also a winner who couldn't make it tonight. So for those of you who could make it, thank you. Andrew, why don't you come on up and stand next to me? And I think Director Bartolotta's got something for you. Andrew Kellenberger is a 4th grade teacher at Normandale Hills Elementary. He was nominated actually by another staff person who's actually standing up here, Don Mary, this year. And Don notes that Andrew goes above and beyond in his work in the Normandale Hills Elementary classrooms. He works to include all the STRIVE, which is our center-based special education program there for developmental and cognitive disabled students. He involves them in his classroom and has several students from his classroom who work with students in the STRIVE room, so kind of going back and forth. The other big thing is that he sang a very spirited rendition, apparently, of Happy Birthday to one of the STRIVE students this year, which basically pretty much made her year. So, Andrew, thanks for all you do for special education students. Secondly, we have Abby Swan. You want to come stand up here? Abby is obviously one of our student winners, which is great. She's a 5th grade student at Normandale Hills Elementary, and she was nominated by another parent, by a parent of a special ed student in the building. And what this parent says is that Abby has become a great friend to her son, who's a nonverbal special education student at Normandale Hills. She greets him every day at Kids Safari and walks and plays with him around the stage and other areas. And what's really cool is she has helped him to become, as this parent puts it, just one of the gang, which I think is awesome. Abby has become this student's really, quote, first friend, according to this parent, and actually plays with him on weekends and went bowling with him one weekend, it sounds like, so which is really cool. And the parent who nominated Abby says, Abby has given my son the best gift of all, friendship and just being a kid. So thank you, Abby. And last and certainly not least is Don Mary. Don, if you want to come and stand next to me here. Don Mary is the Strive Room teacher at Normandale Hills Elementary. That's a DCD, Developmental Cognitive Disability classroom. And her students have a multitude of disability areas and actually a lot of medical issues too. And Don and her staff and the students and the faculty at Normandale Hills have had a tough year because unfortunately one of the students in Don's class passed away this year. Cody Batchelder had been with Don for 4 years before he passed away this January. And Don worked very closely with the family over those years and was a big help to them in many ways during that difficult time in January. Don and her staff actually worked with the family throughout the visitation and funeral, created a number of big poster boards with pictures of Cody that was shared with everybody at those events. And Don actually served as a pallbearer at the funeral. So the family wanted to know just how thankful they are for the hard work that Don and her team at Normandale Hills put in with Cody, and want everybody to know that she's a great resource. Don and her team do great work for all students. So thank you, Don. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are one or both of Dawn's parents or guardians here? Excuse me, Abby's parents? Hey, thank you. Thank you also. And the next item is our recognition of an award that was given by the Bloomington Federation of Teachers, an annual award, the Gary Seamers Exemplary Educator Award. And I call upon the president of the Bloomington Federation, Wendy Marchek, to address us now.
Good evening, Chair Culver, Superintendent Fujitaki, cabinet members, board members, and listening audience. This year, our recipient couldn't make it tonight, but she's watching us on television. She wasn't allowed to drive tonight, so she's at home watching. Her name is Pam Ludvigsen. She is highly respected as a colleague, a peer coach, a staff development leader, an executive council leader, and one of my friends. Pam has been the union's go-to person for all things related to professional issues. Here are a few statements from those that nominated Pam, and she had many nominations. Avid follower of current trends in professional development, advocates for high-quality programming, a perfect example of how we as teachers need to keep growing and changing, advocates for teachers to get what they need to be effective and successful, empowers others around her. Pam has lived and breathed QComp for the last 2 years. She was the co-chair of the QComp writing committee. Pam was that person that always brought the latest research to the group so we could determine the direction of the QComp plan in Bloomington. She's also been our co-chair of professional issues for 5 years. She is passionate, forward-thinking, humble, intelligent, committed, and a true professional. And I am honored to present this award to her tonight. Thank you.
And thank you, Wendy. This is a time of the meeting on the agenda where we invite those who would like to address the school board on an item not on the agenda to come forward. And Kathy Foy has asked to be given the opportunity to address the board this time, so I call on Kathy. And if there's anybody else who'd like to address the board following Kathy's presentation, there's a time to come forward. Kathy Foy.
Thank you very much, distinguished board and administration. It's my pleasure and honor to be here tonight. I thank you so much to invite me and allow me to present. I'm, again, Kathy Jacobs-Foy. My daughter attends the Olson Middle School and is in the 8th grade. I'm here as a concerned parent as well as a representative of other concerned parents, family, and friends to share a problem that's occurred and ask for your help in a resolution so that we don't experience it again. The incident that brings me here tonight was the presentation of a PG-13, parents strongly cautioned movie called Contagion. It was shown to the 8th grade students ages 13 and 14, and it was during their health class without parental consent or awareness. The movie Contagion is a Hollywood sensationalized hypothetical movie about the spread of viruses and the pandemonium that occurs if a worldwide outbreak were to occur. It's listed as a medical thriller, and per the MPAA, which is the Motion Picture Association of America, it's listed as having thematic material, which is disturbing content. It contains gun violence, deaths, a graphic autopsy during which a human head, I apologize, is peeled like a banana. A medical thriller shown to the 8th grade students is a concern. There's been much discussion, and unbeknownst to me, I just read in the Bloomington Sun that you all are going to be discussing the security issues. But there's been a lot of discussion about physical safety and what has occurred in the Olson Middle School health curriculum can or could impact emotional safety. The students in our Bloomington school system should really have both physical and emotional safety. I'm asking your help and involvement by establishing a policy for the Bloomington district with regards to the PG-13 movies as a part of the curriculum, and that informs parents so that they can determine if that presentation is going to be appropriate for their child. It's a partnership. We are here to work with administration and the school system. Together, we can come up with a better solution. We can and should do better, and actually we're obligated to do better for the kids. I thank you so much.
Thank you for addressing us tonight, and we appreciate your keeping the board informed and bringing your concerns forward in the way that you have. You have received some responses from the school district. The school board does not customarily respond at the time you make a presentation, but your concerns are acknowledged and have been taken under advisement by administrators. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board at this time on a matter not on the agenda? Then we'll move forward to the A agenda. Part A is items that generally do not require a board discussion.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Party agenda and seconded. Is there any item that a board member would like more information about or would wish to discuss? Otherwise, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. And it carries. And we'll now move to the Part B agenda, which will be reports and some resolutions to move forward with board business. First item is the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee recommendation response to a resolution dated November 13th with Heidi Hecker, our Director of Curriculum, Curriculum Research, David Heisted, and Tim Anderson. Yes. Superintendents, Fujitaki.
Good evening. For all our audiences,
Excuse me.
I'll introduce the team that's at the presentation table. I'll start on my right. Sitting there is Mr. Sean Foley. He's our secondary curriculum coordinator. Next to him is Dr. Tim Anderson, our Director of Teaching and Learning. In the center is Dr. Dave Heisted, our Director of Research, Evaluation, and Assessment. Next is Ms. Heidi Hecker. She is our Indian Education Program Coordinator. And finally, Ms. Elida Kane. She's our Elementary Curriculum Coordinator. In November of 2012, the board passed a resolution directing administration to work in collaboration with the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee to create a plan to improve the math achievement levels of our students, our American Indian students. Tonight you'll hear that plan that was created by members of this team and the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. And however, the plan not only addresses American Indian students, but all students A cornerstone of that plan is our response to intervention program. In addition, the board requested to hear about our findings on factors that may impact the achievement levels of our students. Dr. Anderson will begin by sharing the plan to improve math achievement levels. Dr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, Board Chair Culver, members of the board, cabinet guests. It's my pleasure tonight to speak along with members of this team and update you on some of the work that we've been doing. First, our plan to increase achievement in math has been largely twofold. First, working in partnership and in collaboration with team members, both academic services and the American Indian Education Office, the Parent Advisory Committee, termed APAC. In a number of ways and in a number of interfaces, we've developed the work tonight and pledged work in the future based on collaborative efforts in a team sense. Secondly, our plan efforts we've worked to tie to our response to intervention work in the district. With regard to response to intervention, we remain inspired by the work of Matos, Weber, and Buffum, and remain resolute in our belief that RTI is our best hope to provide every child with the time and support they need to learn. So, a reminder about what is response to intervention. Commonly known as RTI, the underlying premise of response to intervention is that schools should work to not delay providing support for struggling learners until they fall far enough behind to qualify for special education. And that's both in academics and with regard to behavior. Instead, we should work to provide timely, targeted, and systematic interventions to all students who demonstrate a need. So our plan then is to continue to build and effectively implement response to intervention. So let me mention a few things about how our system is working to implement RTI. First, all of our teachers are expected to use response to intervention in their work. This includes things that have been mentioned many times in front of this board, like formative assessment or differentiation. RTI starts with teachers using good instruction to teach all students and tracking results to measure students' progress. Students who are not making adequate progress receive help in the form of interventions. Teachers intervene by changing their teaching and by seeking help from others. Response in response to intervention means teachers measure how students respond to the change in teaching and the additional help or interventions. If the student's learning doesn't improve, then the teachers will continue to change their teaching and seek other types of help until the student's learning does improve. Now, if a student's learning still doesn't improve, the teacher may ask for special help for that student. Now, for a bit more specificity with regard to math and with regard to our RTI efforts in math, I'd like to defer to Elida Kane and Sean Foley, as the superintendent mentioned, our curriculum coordinators, who have worked most directly with facilitating the response to intervention efforts regarding math. Elida.
Good evening. Good to see everyone tonight. Thank you for having us here. So I'm going to speak a few minutes about elementary math intervention efforts that we have in place. We have different sets of items available for students who might need Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 supports. We have several practices in place for all students, and that will provide some support when needed. Those include access to a student reference book, which literally is a reference book that students can take to and from school, and they can use this while they're working on homework or other work that they might be doing to refer to what they've learned currently, in the past, if they want, in the future, or play some of the games that support continual learning and practice. We also do subscribe to Everyday Math Online. This allows students access to, again, the student reference book in a digital or web-based format. It allows them to play math games that facilitate the practice of their fact fluency and other skills that they've learned. They can access vocabulary, and parents can even go on there and learn how to do algorithms, or if they forgot their homework, they can print it right there at home if need be. I think you have heard a little bit about the flipped classroom that's been taking place at some of our schools, and especially at Normandale Hills. Those are videos that have been created by some of our Bloomington teachers, and those are used to front load or pre-teach skills. And what's great about those is that students can then go back and review those again, parents can watch them, and then those are available for all students as well. So those are some of the things that are available to everyone and are sort of part of our Tier 1 or our core program. But for students who might fall under Tier 2 or Tier 3 and need a little bit more help or may need more intervention, some of the things we have in place, we have our after-school program that looks a little bit different at each building, but every single one of our 10 buildings does have an after-school program during the school year where students will get extra assistance in either reading or math or both, so some additional time there. It's usually about an hour. Our summer school, if students are eligible and teachers refer them to summer school, we have a wonderful program that's half day. It runs all of July, where again students will receive instruction in reading, math, and then another 45 minutes in the area that they may be struggling in as well. And then lastly, this year we do have math interventions that started this year. We started a pilot program. 5 of our 10 elementary schools have been participating in this program. Myself and Gina Miller have been working with Dave Heistad to gather some data based on the work that's being done with our RTI specialists in the building, and it's going very well. It's going so well that we hope to roll it out to all 10 schools next year and continue providing time and opportunities for our students to have more support to learn.
Thank you. I'm going to take the secondary path here. As both Tim and Elida mentioned, we have a number of supports within our core program, and these continue at the secondary level. And I believe you have a handout in your board packet that summarizes a number of these, and I'm just going to highlight a few of them. In our core program, we also, as elementary does, have some supports that are available online, and those are available for students to access during the school day. Whether it be computers in the back of the classroom if they need some differentiated assistance before and after school in the media center. And then of course they're available at home for parents to look at and provide assistance, or for the student themselves to look at. We also have academic seminars at all of our buildings, and that's a relatively new addition to our RTI plan, where we have time built into the school day where students can choose to attend, or sometimes teachers will select students to attend based on how formative assessments have gone. And the nice thing about that is it is built into the school day, and it's able to be very targeted based on student needs. And so if teachers have 15 students that have really been struggling on a particular standard or benchmark or learning target, they're able to call those students in and work with those 15 students for 45 minutes specifically on that learning target. They're not being pulled out of class. Regular instruction, they're able to get help on the specific things that they need at the specific time that they need it. We also have some more intensive interventions on the second half of the page. One of the cornerstones of those is the support classes. And so those are classes for students who are in the regular math class, but then they get what we sometimes call a double dose of math. And so they're in the regular math class, but then they're also in an additional class taught typically by a different teacher. It's not a new book, it's not a new set of homework, it's a class that's in support of that same regular math class, so that the variable becomes time. Kids who need a little bit more time to learn the same level of content get that time, and they're not falling behind their peers. And then sort of a tier 3 intervention for some students, some special ed and some not, would be some pull-out classes where students are pulled out of their regular ed math, their regular mainstream math class, and in a more intensive, often it's sort of a double block math class where they're in math for a longer period of time. That's often for students who are a little bit farther behind, and with the hope of that intensive intervention for a year or two will get them caught up to the rest of their peers, and then they can continue on in the regular class, perhaps in a support class, perhaps not, depending on the need. And so that's sort of the overview of the RTI model for math at the secondary level.
So you've heard an update on some of the efforts related to our collaborative work and also the response to intervention, specific intervention examples, both at the elementary and the secondary level. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Dave Heisted from the Research Evaluation and Assessment Office to share findings with you related to mobility rates, attendance rates, and referral information, among other data.
Thank you, Tim. Chair Culver, Superintendent Fujitaki, and directors, I've been privileged to share this information with the American Indian Parent Association and also with the African American parents, and had really good discussion of these factors. I apologize for my voice. I have some allergies going today, so I'll try to speak up here. Starting with the first slide, the three main factors that I'm going to talk about are. Do you want to do that?
Sure, we'll do the clicking.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Tim. So the three factors that had a big impact on overall performance in mathematics, especially for American Indian students, but also for African American students and for all students in general, were student attendance, student mobility, and pre-K readiness. And starting with student attendance, we downloaded the information on excused and unexcused absences for the past 3 years and found that they are highly correlated with learning rates, not just the percent proficient. We know that students who have a high percentage of proficiency tend to attend more often, but also learning rates, so that the students who are there at least 95% of the time have much higher learning rates than students who are there less than 95%. And that would be if you were enrolled for the whole school year, that would be 8 or less absences. And so that's a message that we can send, that we can't control sickness as much as we would like. But you know, even having one unexcused absence has a big impact on student rates of progress in math. And you can see from the graph on the fourth slide that American Indian students actually have the lowest rate of attendance of any of the 5 racial ethnic groups, with only 52% of the students attending 95% of the time or more. You can also see that African American rate and Hispanic rate are a little bit lower, but the lowest by far is American Indian. And if you go to the right side of the graph, you'll see that 28% of the American Indian students are there less than 90% of the time. And so this is a matter of concern, and we had good conversation with APAC about the impacts. If you look at the next slide, slide number 5, you'll see that the students that attended 95% of the days or more had higher rates of learning than students with less than 95%. The overall rate of learning for American Indian students, and that's why we're doing this report, is low to start with. But then if you are there less than 95% of the time, you make about 65% of a year's growth. Students that are there 95% or more have more like 80% of a year's growth. You can see that Asian students, Hispanic, African American, and white students all do better if they're there 95% of the time. And so we know that you have to be there to learn. And this, you know, this relationship is a correlation. It's not necessarily causal in one direction. It could be that the students that are achieving the most want to attend more often as well. So it's a little bit of chicken and egg. But especially when you see the learning rates this different, it suggests that we have a causal relationship accounting for at least part of this. At the bottom, or at the next slide 6, we see a much larger rate of unexcused absences with American Indian students as well. Almost one unexcused absence per student. We have an enrollment of 110 students this last year. We had, I think, over the course of the year, 128 total American, or 121 total students that were there. So, you know, that's about 120 unexcused absences. And you can see that rate is more than 8 times that of white students. And looking at the next slide, we can see the impact. Well, actually, we can see that 1 in 10 American Indian students had at least one unexcused absence, so those 10 students were really impacted. When we look at the learning rates, we see again that if you had no unexcused absence, you have about a 70% of a year's worth of growth, and if you had 1 or more unexcused absence, about 57%. You can also see it impacts all racial ethnic groups, not just American Indian students. On slide 9, the version I sent to you of the slide deck had a typo. The first bullet should read, as it does on the screen, 96.6%. Students who were proficient in math had an overall rate of attendance of 96.6%. Students who were not proficient had overall rate of 91.7. And the No Child Left Behind, you know, kind of benchmark was 90%. So everybody thinks, oh, we're okay, we're over 90% with both groups. But the way I'd like to talk about is what percentage of the students were there 95% of the time. Because even though on any given day, 90% of the American Indian students are there, when you look at those particular students who are not there, at least 95%, that's where you see this big impact. And so only 42% of the students who are not proficient attended 95% of the days. And 77% of the students who were proficient attended 90. So then you can see it is a pretty big difference. And sometimes when we look at that average daily membership, it can disguise the fact that we have some students that are really struggling with attendance. So that's the attendance portion. Several people had asked me to look at mobility. There are 4 different types of mobility, and we had data on a couple, 3 of the 4 types. We don't have data yet on long-term residential stability, although I've talked to a person who has that information, and we may be in the future able to blend that in with our data as well as how many times a family has moved in the last year or so. But we do have information on long-term stability in the district. So what I did was I looked from second grade to 8th grade. This is on slide 11. And it turned out that only 34% of American Indian students were stable in the district from grade 2 to grade 8. And that compares to 62% of white students. So the question is, does that have an impact? Being in the district actually does have a fairly large impact. On the next slide, slide number 12, I put this on the pathway rainbow that you've seen before. And in the orange dots, you'll see the learning progress for students who were continuously enrolled from 2nd grade to 8th grade. And in the black diamonds, you see the students who either left early or came late. And they tend to score much lower than the students who were continuously enrolled during that period of time. So stability is one of those factors that impacts along with attendance. And you can see that the students that were stable were about on course for 4-year college eligibility, whereas the students that who came in late or left early were much lower in their overall proficiency in mathematics. We also have some homeless and highly mobile students. I'm sorry I forgot to put the number of students on this slide, but we find that 1.2% of American Indian students were classified as homeless or highly mobile, so they may be living in different relatives' houses every night, or staying in a station wagon or something else. But this gets reported by social workers and gets reported up to the federal government. And you can see that that rate is 3 times as high as white students, but in this case, African American students have the highest rate of homelessness with 3.8%. Now, compared to Minneapolis, this is a very low rate, but it's still of concern, especially when you look at slide number 14, which shows that students who are not homeless are making about 90% of a year's growth in math. Students who are homeless are making about 15% of a year's growth. So that is a huge impact, is students that are homeless or highly mobile. And then the third factor that really predicts future success in mathematics is readiness. And most districts have concentrated on literacy and pre-reading skills before kindergarten, but it turns out that pre-math skills are also very predictive of future math ability. So you can predict with 78% accuracy how students are going to do in terms of proficiency in grade 2 based on knowing their numbers and counting and being able to separate objects, basic kinds of pre-math skills. And so that's an area that I think we can put on the pathways, and not just the pre-literacy, but the pre-mathematics. And so we've seen some improvement over time. When I looked in 2007, 60% of American Indian students were on track for math proficiency by the beginning of kindergarten. In fall of 2012, 86%. So we've seen some real increases there. But obviously, we'd like to get that percentage up even higher. You can see on this graph on slide 16 that Hispanic students have the lowest rate of mathematics numeracy skills, we call it, at the beginning of kindergarten, and that hasn't improved as much. So there's a real emphasis area there with Hispanic students. Then I put that on the pathway as well. On slide 17, you can see the students that are ready in numeracy in kindergarten start out at a much higher level in second grade on the MAP test, and they increase very rapidly from about on track for a four-year college to on track for the University of Minnesota or a selective college. Whereas the students who start out not math ready start out lower, close to just on track for graduation. They accelerate, but at a lower rate. So it seems this is an area that we could concentrate more on. I'm doing as much reading as I possibly can on learning numeracy skills, and I'm sure the whole team, we're working on RTI together, and we're going to be evaluating these interventions to see if kids who get the interventions are producing higher rates of learning. This is the fun part for me, is really getting information on which students get that extra help, and then is it really producing benefits. And soon I'm going to pass it to Heidi, but I've got one more slide. I've got the number of referrals, suspensions, what's called pause, and out-of-school suspensions. We have in-school and out-of-school. And I was just amazed at the low rate of suspensions in Bloomington compared to Minneapolis, where I was used to seeing, on average about one suspension per student in some cases. We have referrals. Now those referrals are not the same thing as suspensions, and they may vary a little bit from school to school. But it's your in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, and pause when they go to this separate program that you know, you have more of a consequence that restricts students. And the referral and going to the quiet room is a much less intensive consequence. So in general, there are too few suspensions for me even to statistically analyze. And so that's a good thing. I mean, you can see on the graph, it's almost zero. I did look at the referral disproportion, and on slide 19, there's a pie graph, and on the left-hand side is, of all the referrals, what percentage are American Indian? It was actually about 1.5, but it rounded up on the graph to 2%. When you look on the right side, you see that American Indian are about 1% of the population. So there's a little disproportion for American Indian students. There's also disproportionate referrals for African American students. And this is true in every district I've seen. But you can see those are the two areas that have higher rates of referrals. White, Hispanic, and Asian have lower rates of referrals than their population. But the interesting thing is how few of these referrals end up in suspensions, and that's quite remarkable. So overall, American Indians have 9.2 suspensions per 100 students per year. I tried that out instead of saying 0.092 suspensions per kid. You know, African American students have 13.1. So there is disproportion in terms of suspensions, but the overall rate is quite low and pretty impressive from data I've seen. So now I'd like to pass the gauntlet to Heidi, who probably has a better voice than I do.
Thanks. I'm going to talk about, first I'm going to talk about the degree to which Native students and their families are accessing existing resources and district programs. And the areas that we're asked to be highlighted is early childhood, kindergarten, and after school and summer, both academic and enrichment programming. So we'll start with early childhood, and we don't have a lot to look at this point. We know of 5 students, Native students, who are in preschool program. Three of those 5 are in kinder prep. And we run into the challenge with insufficient data to know how many Native 4-year-olds even exist in Bloomington, because we don't have that census data. So, and I don't have a very clear picture of how many incoming kindergartners we have this year. But this is what we're looking at currently for early childhood. When we look at all-day kindergarten, this year we have 14 Native students in kindergarten altogether. Out of those 14, 5 are in all-day kindergarten, so not even half of our students are in all-day K. 3 of those 5 in all-day K receive scholarships for the all-day option. And moving on to summer school, last summer, we had a total of 4 Native students who attended summer school. And I thought that looked like a really low number. So I asked, well, how many of our students were referred? And you know, maybe that will tell us something. And I guess at this point in the game, it was too difficult to go back to find out how many of the students who were referred were Native and how many opted out. But what was interesting, I did ask, well, how many referrals were there in total? And so it rounded out to be about 1,800 students were referred to summer school in the whole district, and only a third of those, about 500 of them, enrolled for summer school. So then 4 didn't look as bad as I thought. I don't know if that's, but on the other hand, I don't know if that's a third of our students, Native students. This year, I think maybe we will try to be more in tune to how many of our students were actually referred. Then moving on to the alternative learning centers. Currently, we have 21 Native students who are enrolled in the after-school ALC programs across the district. That includes both elementary and middle. And we have more elementary students. There's 14 out of those 21 who are elementary students in an ALC program. When we look at enrichment programming, during the school year, This year, we've only had 11 Native students who are able to participate in fee-based after-school enrichment programming. Last summer, we had 12 who were able to take summer spectrum classes. And I think it's important to note that 10 of those 12 were sponsored or scholarshiped by the Office of Educational Equity. And the last slide in this section is enrichment programming through Indian education. As many of you know from the reporting that we do, we have after school or evening and weekend programming. And we've had 45 students participate this school year in grades K through 12. Last summer we had 10 students who grades 1 through 5 participated. And next I'm going to move on to curriculum and talk about the level of culturally relevant curriculum relating to American Indian students that's offered in our district. And I don't have any slides for this. It's just, we're just going to do discussion and narrative, basically. And there's not a lot to report on in terms of what's actually being taught, but I don't want to, that's not the end of the story. As you all know, we have a fairly new curriculum department in terms of curriculum and directors. I think the most senior being Tim Anderson, both age and, I'm sorry, and tenure. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Ouch.
And so much of what is in place was put in place before we have the then the people who are now in the seats of coordinators and director. And with the current coordinators, they worked a lot with both of our parent advisory committee and ourselves. And as you know, the curriculum goes through different cycles, and we did a lot of work with the secondary social studies curriculum. And I was invited to come to the steering committee meetings. We did a couple of mini workshops. Our APAC committee went over the standards on their own and then met as a committee and prioritized them to what level they thought they should be put at, whether it's important or essential. And we knew that there were so many more American Indian standards this year than possibly could be, put at the essential or important level. So we thought it would be important to offer suggestions as far as how our parents feel, what should be taught, what could maybe be tabled, or at least be put into enhancing what needs to percolate to the top. And so they did that work and presented it to the committee, and everything that they recommended or suggested happened. As well as we just found out today happened also at the elementary level. So that was a huge success. So while at this point there's not a lot of standards that are at the essential and important level in social studies, that's rapidly changing. And I think this is an ongoing relationship that we've formed through all the collaboration that's happened this year and last year. And I think it's something really worth celebrating. We're about to roll out or start looking at music and art, and I'm not really sure what's on the horizon after that, but I think I'll hand some over to Tim, who can maybe do some more edu-speak around in this area than I can.
Thanks, Heidi. Well, I'd certainly underscore the notion that the partnership is on an upward trajectory, and that we felt specific efficacy this year related to standards prioritization and social studies, which is the curricular area K-12 that is under formal review. Certainly we're here tonight particularly to consider math collaboration, and you've heard a lot about that, but I'm just appreciative of the partnership that Heidi alluded to between the American Indian Education Office, the APAC Committee, and Academic Services. Specifically with regard to the degree to which our curricular materials are culturally relevant to Native students, we fostered our collaborative efforts around kind of three notions or three ideas. First, this idea of how we can engage or best engage students. So, we've agreed to the idea that, and the literature would reinforce this, that engagement comes from many strategies. So when we consider our collaboration and the strategies that we're employing in this effort, to what degree are students seeing themselves reflected in their school experience? In our partnership, we often think about the notion of windows and mirrors. So what experiences in school, in our classrooms, allow students to see themselves reflected? And similarly, what are those experiences that are really windows for students, looking into some other story or experience than their own? And so the very nature of considering that question in our curriculum helps us move to more cultural relevancy. The same question would go to classroom level materials. Again, seeking ways to make the educational experience engaging and relevant to students at our classroom level. And then, you know, under this idea of engagement of students, what tools can we use that accelerate those two prior notions? So that could be related to professional development, whether that's provided by or with the office, with Heidi's office. It could be in using technology in some way. And so what we've agreed to is, in our partnership, to constantly be thinking about the engagement of students. What are the resources? What are the trainings? And what are the practices and policies that we can build as a part of the regular curriculum process? So again, specifically this year, social studies was in review, and a guiding hallmark question for that work was related to student engagement. A second agreement in our collaborative efforts around this topic is related to engagement of parents. And again, engagement comes from many strategies. So communication overall, even about what resources exist, and access to those resources. So, you know, are parents and families aware of the resources, and then are they aware of how to access them? And specific outreach efforts, like curriculum nights. All things that we would consider hand in hand with the curricular area that's specifically in focus. And then lastly, with regard to culturally relevant curriculum, you know, our partnership has included many strategies. So one example is our materials curriculum bias checklist. So we surveyed the metro area. We reached out to the network of curriculum directors across the metro, and we said, what tools are you using to evaluate the materials that come into your classrooms? And frankly, across the metro, both in Region 11 and outside of that, the resources weren't deep. So we synthesized the different tools across the metro into a couple different drafts, and we took those tools and under the consult of Heidi have updated the curriculum bias checklist we use when evaluating materials. We've even changed language in those tools to reflect specifically the APAC committee, for example. And I already mentioned that professional development is something that we focused on in this partnership. So just recently, Heidi provided professional development at the secondary level, and we have an ongoing commitment to revisit that training and the next training to develop the next training as teachers implement these new standards and these new materials. And then lastly, related to prioritization of the standards. Heidi already mentioned that standards in the last curriculum revision, for example in social studies, didn't rise to prominent places. They didn't rise to the essential standard like some have in this revision. They didn't rise to the important standard like some have in this revision. And so we feel good about you know, the improvement in that area, and also our continued commitment to collaborate about the prioritization of standards no matter the curricular area. And so those are the key three areas: engagement of students, engagement of parents, and culturally relevant curricula treatment that I'd highlight as a part of that last section E that the board asked us to look into. And I'd just like to issue publicly a thank you for the team and the collaboration to this point, and then what we've committed to moving forward. And it's a credit to the teammates here. I think that I'm in a position to be able to say that. So thank you. And I think that's to be the conclusion of our formal remarks, and that we would turn it over to the board for questions at this time.
All right, board members. Would anyone like to ask questions or respond? Excuse me, Director Bergstrom.
First of all, let me say thank you for coming. I appreciate the information. It's very comprehensive. Let me make sure that I get your names right first. Sean, Tim, David, Heidi, and is it Elida?
It's Elida.
Elida. All right, you can spell it for me later. And I see some parents in the middle back row there. I can see you from here. Just a couple of questions. First of all, is it possible that a student is purposely missing just math class? I remember my days trying to get my head around geometry and trigonometry and thinking that maybe if I just missed that one class, my head wouldn't swim so much. Are we seeing maybe they're just missing a math class, or is it really not possible to exist in the school and not be seen? That's one question. Well, I'll let you go with that one first, and then
Well, the data that I pulled down from TIES had half-day attendance. So there are some students who didn't miss the whole day. They missed a half day. And so I'm assuming that if you missed one class during that morning, you probably would get a half day off. I need to find out more about our attendance system to see if we have period by period attendance. Okay, we do. So I have a homework assignment now to look at period by period attendance and see what I can learn from that. But I know from my experience in Minneapolis, where we had period by period, math was a class that was missed more often than Phi Ed, for example.
So I would just echo that as a former high school administrator. It is possible that that would occur.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm looking at the numbers, and I'm just trying to think. These are bright kids. They're smart kids. Mm-hmm. And just because perhaps they're not doing well in math doesn't mean they're not bright. And maybe they know how to work the system a little bit. Maybe they stay a little longer in the restroom or something. And maybe they're just missing math. I'm wondering, how are the kids doing? How are they responding to this? Are they happy to come to school? Are they dreading to come to school? Or, what's the response from the teachers in the classrooms?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think we have kids who love going to school, and they step up, and then we have kids who, for a variety of reasons don't. And I think too, when we look at this high level of absences, they tend to be kind of concentrated with certain students or maybe families. And so I think, that with the high absences, for instance, and correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes it is very concentrated with a few families, and when we have our smaller numbers, I think that can make it sometimes look different, or maybe it look like many students are missing, but maybe it's really a handful of kids who really have bad attendance. But in my experience, a lot of the students that I work with, they seem like pretty typical school kids. Some days they like it better than others. Everybody loves recess for their favorite class and gym. And sometimes when when they get to high school, it gets a little different. Sometimes ninth grade is tricky to navigate, but I think that seems to be true for many ninth graders. And math, many of our high school students do struggle with math at that level too.
Okay. And then just one last. Are we seeing progress from the students that are in the ALC programs and the enrichment programs? Do we see them coming out the other end better able to hit the road running, or what are we seeing out of those particular programs afterwards?
Yeah, that's one of my interests for this summer is to identify students who have had particular programs, and to the extent possible, it's a little bit hard with a small population like American Indian, but to the extent possible, try to find matched students who didn't have the program, and then calculate the impact, effect size, we call it. We are somewhat limited with 110 students across all the grade levels in doing that kind of analysis for a particular subgroup like American Indian. If I matched on everything else but race, I could maybe do it. But to the extent possible, we want to either evaluate programs by pre-post, how students were doing before they had the intervention and how those same students are doing afterwards, or matching on some criteria so that we get a comparison group.
Great. Thank you very much once again for all the work that you guys are doing. Appreciate it.
Other questions? Yes, Director Ablin.
I just have a couple of three factual type questions. You mentioned that you didn't have the amount of homeless listed on your slide, but I assume you know how many homeless we have in the district. Could you share that, please?
I can do the multiplication for you in my head. You can check it. So we had 1.2% of American Indian students were homeless, and we have 110 total homeless students. So that would be approximately
3.
12. I mean, no, wait a minute, not 12, that'd be 11%, approximately
2 or 3.
2. So it's not a large group.
But
it depends on which denominator. If I did that off of the total number of students that had any enrollment during the year, our cumulative enrollment, it was a little bit higher. So it might be as high as 3, but probably 2.
No, I'm talking without relative to race across the district. All students, how many homeless do we have in the district? Be it white, Asian, Hispanic, Native?
Right.
Or don't we know that?
We will in a minute.
6.8% of 10,000.
28% of 20.
6.8% of 20,000.
That's not quite right either. I'll have to get that for you. I honestly don't have the number. In every district, you have a McKinley-Vento report that goes to the state based on the official end-of-year MARS numbers, and those would be the most accurate to report publicly. So I'd rather not do the math in my head right now.
Okay, that's fine, thanks. Then I want to just compare 2 slides that you had. One slide spoke to 11 Native students. I think it was slide 6. 11 Native students participated in fee-based after-school enrichment. Then one slide later, you had 45 Native students participating in non-fee.
Yep, that's offered through Indian education.
Right. So the fact that, first of all, how much might have they had to pay if they were fee-based?
You know, I don't know. I guess I've never worked that out.
And does it have that much of an impact that 4 times as many students would attend a non-fee based? Is it major?
I think there's a couple of things that are going on. One thing, it is free, and the other thing is community. So it's when we do our programming, it's within the Native community. So it's an opportunity for our Native families to get together with other Native families, and I think that is also attractive. So I think that has to be mentioned as well. But I believe that the fact that there is no fee, considering that about 62% of our population is eligible for free or reduced lunches, I think that says something. That when there's a fee involved, it makes a difference about who can participate.
My real underlying question is, maybe we have to look at what we are charging. Are we charging such a large fee that it's prohibitive? Or are there other things that we we need to get more participation. And if the fees, the costs are prohibitive or not allowing our clientele to participate, maybe we have to look at that. You know, you don't know what the fee is?
I do know what the fees are for, you mean for the other enrichment?
For these 11 that attended.
Yeah, I do know, but what I have heard from parents is that they do talk about the cost being more than they can afford.
Okay. And then just the last question. Can someone tell me how many Native teachers or Native staff people we have in the district?
I don't know how many teachers we have. I don't have that information.
Nobody? Do we have one? Do we have 20?
Be a question for human resources, I guess.
Okay. I would like that answer. Linda.
Thank you. Yes, Director Hibbs?
Just a philosophical question then. I heard everything that you laid out there. Are we doing everything that we can?
I think so. This year, and I wanted an opportunity to say this, I think this year there has been, I think there's been a learning curve definitely for our parent committee, but I think also for myself as well. And I think after all the visitors that have come to the parent committee meetings, we've had a number of directors and coordinators visit our meetings and report on either findings or interventions and options. It sounds like yes, a lot is being done. There was one area though that seems to keep coming up, and that is access to other resources in the district that have a fee. So that is the one area that kind of keeps coming back up to the surface within at our parent committee meetings and when talking with other parents. That's the area that could use some work.
Anyone else?
One of the factors I looked at, mobility is a difficult one to really have an impact on. I mean, we could work on housing and those things with community partners. But I think we can improve attendance and we can improve pre-K readiness. Attendance initiatives, take some time, but I think community awareness of the fact that attendance really matters. Work to make sure that kids get their math homework if they happen to be sick, that kind of thing would help. And pre-K, we have a lot of kids that come in right before school, and we don't get them screened right away at age 3. And we need to come up with ways of connecting those parents to resources before kindergarten. And I know we're doing a great job. Tom Holton has done a great job in getting more and more parents involved in those early stages. But I always think we could do a little bit better. And when we looked at the kids that weren't ready for kindergarten, we plotted it on a geo map. There's certain concentrations of areas, and if there's certain housing areas, et cetera, where we can do more communication, et cetera, I think these are areas we could work on.
I would just say with respects to response to intervention, this isn't a model that you work on it for 1 year and then the next year it's perfectly implemented. We always talk about taking the next steps in fidelity of implementation, building the capacity of folks to implement with high fidelity. We have plans to take the next steps next year. So, specific efforts on taking the next steps on the implementation of RTI, which is complex and multifaceted, impacting all levels of the system. There's more work to do. So we have plans to do that. Part of that, you've heard what that plan set is tonight. And so, yeah, there's more work to do.
So is someone actively looking at those issues and trying to identify what, if anything, we could do about attendance or about mobility or about access? Because this seems like our best chance to address, I mean, this is a relatively small group of students, so we actually could do something to address the gap that exists between, you know, this group of students and other groups of students. It gets a little more untenable with some of those other ethnic groups because they're much larger, but it just seems like as far as getting to root causes about attendance and some of those things, that there's an opportunity here. And I'm just wondering if anyone's actively looking at that.
Well, I know in terms of mobility, in my experience with working with the families, it's usually not a matter of choice. It's usually a matter of circumstances that have forced a family to have to move because they maybe can't afford where they're living, or somebody's lost a job. And so I don't know how we're going to be able to impact mobility because it's usually linked to finances.
When we met with the American Indian Parent Advisory, they really, heard the message, but what they said was, we have a hard time getting other parents to come, to hear the same message. And so, brainstorming ways of getting more parents to be involved with APAC or other kinds of family involvement activities, I think, could be part of it.
Yep.
Well, what about Superintendent?
I can share some information. As far as attendance, the principals all look at it. We have a Be at School program that we work with Hennepin County with, the Hennepin County attorney with. As far as mobility, we've heard that it's a chronic problem. As far as Board Member Ablin's question about homelessness, based upon the math and percentages here, it's about 117 students are homeless, based upon the snapshot at that time. And it's about 180 any time during the school year on any day. And Ready for K, we have a program that's looking at that. As far as access, there is communication between Ms. Hecker and Tom Holton about that, and they're having ongoing dialogues about that. So people are looking at these things. That's the answer to your question.
Do the principals try to get to root causes, though, about attendance issues?
I can't speak to some principals back there if they share. Would you like to help us, Paul? Mr. Meyer? Yeah. Would you come up, please?
Good evening. Again, I'm Paul Meyer, principal of Olson Elementary. And yes, we've had, in fact, I've communicated with Heidi a few times on a student, and I've had to file the RPG meeting on them, or the parent, I forget the acronym, but it's the first step in filing with the county if they get 6 unexcused absences. So we've called ahead of time, we've sent a letter, call again, and if they get 6 unexcused, then we file. And we had one child who was, in their previous district, was tons and tons of absences. Came here, was going well, something comes up and it doesn't go their way, and you don't see them again. So you call on them, you talk to them, you have good conversations, you think they're coming, and then they don't show up. So you try all these different things where you meet them halfway, you try to do things where you can support them by, what if they need a ride or whatnot, those kind of things. So we try to reach out to them, but it just seems we run into that same problem. It's just to get them there and wanting them to really believe in it. And the child was making some pretty good progress, but there's things going on in the home that the child and family are, they're going to get kicked out of their house, or there might be some other issues that are going on that are getting in the way.
Thank you.
In addition to that, the Be at School program is what he's talking about. There's monthly reporting by each of our sites to the county. Then the consequence could be a charge of educational neglect brought by the county office against the family.
And then the last thing is just with respect to parent engagement, is there anything more that we can be doing there to, you know, I mean, you said that one of the concerns is that we can't always get parents involved. But again, do we understand the root causes of why they can't or choose not to be involved?
We're still trying to understand that too. Even with, we'd like to, even though we've had 45 students who have participated, we still like to see more. And so that's always our question too when we offer. And so sometimes there's just multiple layers. Sometimes it's comfort level for our Native families or our Native parents coming to the school. And that there's a lot of different reasons for that. Sometimes it could be transportation, could be work schedules. So for getting our parents here, that's why. Now, I agree that, I think it was brought up, I think Dave alluded to that earlier, that we have parents who aren't aware of some of the interventions that are available, that Elida was talking about, some of the algorithms that are available, or the animated algorithms that are available online. So what we have planned for next year, if we get the funding, is that we do have like a family academy, I guess, or a weekly family gathering where they'll have a meal, they'll have some parent training, then as well, and then also have some cultural components to it as well. And within that time, we plan to hopefully educate our parents on the resources that are out there, the importance of attendance, if there are attendance issues, why are they happening. So we do have a plan to increase parent engagement to help educate them next year.
And that'll be specific to American Indian families. It's separate from the Family Academy that Mr. Kaufman's talked about. Okay. Thank you.
If I could interrupt, say one more thing. Two families that I've interacted with, they were in a crisis mode. In fact, one of the children, his father was killed in a motorcycle accident earlier in the fall. So dealing with that, dealing with a father going away for work to do something, is not going to be home for 6 months, and it all relies on mom. These are the kind of things that these two children were experiencing, and they're just trying to survive.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions?
Yeah.
Director Corman.
Yes. Thank you for the very helpful and detailed presentation that you brought to us today. This is also, my questions are also about numbers. So, and did I hear that you say there are 45 students total? Indian American students in the district?
No, right now, our latest count, because I've heard several different numbers, the latest count we got was 144. Suddenly it jumped, and we're looking into why we had this huge jump of 20-some students in a month.
So do we have...
we had 45 students who participated in our enrichment programming this year.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, so 144 students, so are we talking about how many families?
I think we have about 90. Well, with the increase, not sure that translates as families, but approximately 90 families.
Okay. Do we know about graduation rate? I understand that mobility is always an issue, but do we have an idea based on, the last years about graduation rate?
Yeah, I wish I had that on the top of my head. I was just looking at graduation rates for different districts. On our official No Child Left Behind report, it says NA because we have too few students. So the state has to calculate this, and if you have less than 20 students starting in 9th grade, they won't calculate it for you. So we're kind of at a loss for the official graduation rate for our American Indian students. It's something I can work on, though, to try to approximate. If I go back 4 years and grab all the 9th graders that should have graduated by 2012, then I can find out how many left the district. The new graduation rates count students who leave the state as if they had dropped out. So really deflate the graduation rates now compared to what they used to be reported. But it's something I will work on and get back to you as soon as I can.
Mm-hmm. And the last one is, you were talking about online access or doing homework using computers at home. Have we been able to identify how many families have internet access right now out of those 90, about 90 families that we might have?
I don't know.
We don't know that.
I don't know that.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to follow up the question about access that came up a short while ago. Is there a lack of resources in order to provide scholarships to families or to students? Is that why we don't have the access for students, or are they not aware that assistance is available, or are they not taking advantage of it? What's the hang up?
I think, and from what I understand, and from what our parents have said at our meetings, is there is a lack of awareness of how to, because on most of the, on a lot of the things that the registration forms, it does not have, it's not very clear how to access scholarship money. I know on Summer Spectrum it's spelled out pretty clearly in there, but not on, for the after-school programs during the school year, it's not clear. So that's part of our, on our agenda for next year when we're working with parents too, and every opportunity we have.
So that will be changed. And is there a limit as to how much is available to provide scholarships, or are we open to doing that wherever it's needed?
We don't have scholarship money through Indian Ed, but through Community Ed, I don't know what their limit is. I don't have the answer for that.
We'll need to find out more about that. I'll talk to you about that. I made a note because I'm wondering if that's a matter for the school board then, in terms of policy, to say that this is something that we do in this district, and if that would have any impact, or if there's a reason that that's not possible for us to use resources, or the way money is designated, it can't go for help. Because certainly I want to see that you do follow up on that idea of opening the door by providing better outreach by whatever means, or rewording applications, because it would be my understanding that that's something that we are offering in terms of kindergarten students, and I'm wondering why we aren't doing it with other kinds of supplemental educational assistance, if that is, limited in some way. But I won't dig into that now, but I do think that's something we could follow up on. I very much appreciate the information you're bringing forward. It seems to be a very vigorous response to the questions that the school board was asking last fall and winter, and moving forward in this way does provide a template, an example of how to approach dealing with various student populations in order to dig down and find out a little bit more about what is going on, and to come up with some ways to improve how we are involving families. And we'll continue to look for additional information, whether it's about transportation barriers, or information being disseminated, or if there are, in fact, your comment, Heidi, a short while ago, we need maybe, depending on the available resources for some initiatives we want to take. I mean, the school board needs to know about that, I think, and see what we can do to do what we can in order to make sure that this is a robust response to what you brought forward. So thank you. Thank you for your response for our requests.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from school board members? Is there another checkpoint that we have coming up on the agenda? When will we be revisiting this topic? Anybody know? Superintendent Fujitaki, are we scheduled for a follow-up?
The committee meets and they come back with a resolution of concurrence or non-concurrence, and that usually takes place either in spring sometime. I think this year we did it in February.
Fall. It's in fall.
It's in fall. Okay.
About December, specifically.
Okay. So I think that's an important step then, as well, is to have that response from that advisory process to what initiatives have been taken this year. So we would see something, say, early fall? Was that when we first got the resolution? Was October?
No, it was a little later, like.
A little later than that?
December, I believe.
Okay, so I know our resolution is dated November. I just wondered how much time there was before that, so, all right. Good, thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
And all the efforts you did prior to this presentation tonight as well, the time you put in to answer our questions. Anything further on this subject? Okay. We'll move on then. So the next item on our agenda is a social studies curriculum report, for which we've had a little supplementary information that's been brought to us, and so I am going to introduce Beth Anderson in order to let us know where things stand, and we have an approval resolution to begin the conversation. So is there someone who'd like to make that resolution then to get this on the table?
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Director
Be it
Bartolotti.
resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 271 adopts the social studies curriculum for grades K-5 effective with 2013-2014 school year.
Okay, the motion to accept the curriculum is made, seconded by Director Bergstrom.
All right, thank you,
Ms.
Chair
Anderson.
Culver. Yes, Superintendent Fujitaki, board members, and audience, both here and at their homes. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about the new social studies standards. Tonight you're hearing K-5. Later in the month you will hear about 6 through 12 with that. So one thing before we start the process, I have both Beth Flotmeyer here and Elida, who gets to sit at the table for a long time this evening with me, who have really helped facilitate the whole process with that. And I want to remark, coming off of the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, that I've just been so proud of the group, of the collaboration that has happened throughout this whole process. The social studies standards really are not going to be standing alone as just its own discipline as one of the 4 core, but it's an excellent opportunity for us to weave them in with all of the disciplines, and I think that really will lend itself to some excellent relevant learning for our students. So we've been working with the Language Arts Adoption Committee as well, looking at standards to integrate, the media directors looking at how to integrate this into technologies and new learning. And especially a good thanks to Heidi Hecker and her group too, who actually reviewed the standards you'll hear and gave us some input and actually helped us revise and change some of them that more impact with their group as well. And also we've really focused on the pathways to graduation too, thinking about where students are, where do we need to go, and what tools do we need to get there. So I think it's been really impactful work so far, and we're very excited to share with you. So I'm going to turn it over to both Beth and Elida to talk about the process at this time.
So our 3 main objectives that we have for tonight are to introduce you to the new Minnesota Social Studies standards. We also want you to understand the new vision of the standards as compared to the old format of the standards. They look very different. And then we want to bring some awareness to you about the shifts that have happened within the new standards and things that they've added, that the state has added. They've made a big push to have integration of the English language arts standards that we brought to you last year. So we will show you a little bit of that as well.
First, our Social Studies Steering Committee. We have ensured that all schools have representation, so we have at least 1 teacher sitting on the committee from each of our 10 elementaries, and we've worked hard to also make sure that we have at least 2 teachers from every grade level. So there's 2 first grade, 2 second grade, 2 third grade, so that it really allows for some collaboration and discussion while going through this process. We also have our offices of special ed and English language learners represented, and parents as well. To give you an idea of some of the work that we've done so far and what's coming up, this year we reviewed best practices in social studies, reviewed the standards, and we worked to prioritize them. And that's what we're bringing to you today. Next year then, we will take that prioritization along with some criteria that we create based on the standards to evaluate the materials that we currently have and possibly select new materials, begin professional development around the new standards and those materials. And then the following year, in 2014-15, we'll begin our program assessment and monitoring.
Okay, so our feedback sources on the standards so far have been the District Curriculum Advisory Committee, which we met with them last week. The District Diversity Advisory Committee, they have seen and approved our standards, as well as the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. They gave us quite a bit of feedback, and we made some changes based on their feedback. We also went to the principals, who asked us a few things about pathways and how they were aligned to that, and we are here tonight at the school board to get your approval. One of the other feedback sources that we do have is that we also work very closely with the secondary curriculum coordinators to make sure that we are working on alignment, so we go past the 5th grade level to make sure everything is aligned. The way that we look at our standards is we use the work of Larry Ainsworth, and we determine whether the standards are going to be essential, important, or enhancing. We do need to teach all of the standards, but the prioritizing helps us really focus our instruction toward those that are critical for students to be successful in their future years. So that will move us on to this slide, is how we define essential as we use Ainsworth methodology of endurance. Will it go beyond the initial testing? So we do assess all of our essential standards. However, there is no state test, and we are assured that there won't be a state test in social studies through legislation. Then we also look at leverage. So will the standard cross multiple disciplines? We know that we are going to be incorporating our English language arts standards a lot with the social studies, just due to some of the skill language that is provided in both of the standards. And then we also look at readiness, which is whether the student is going to be able to need this to be successful in the next grade level.
So some of the new mandates regarding the new state standards. We have grade-specific benchmarks in grades K-8. Previously, our old standards documents, the benchmarks that were provided to us were grade-banded, and what that meant was that they gave us a large amount of benchmarks, and the state said, these group of benchmarks are for kindergarten and 1st grade, this set is for 2nd and 3rd, and this set is for 4th and 5th, and as a school district, you can decide what is taught where. They've done away with that now, and they've now told us exactly what will be taught in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, which is nice for kids if they're moving from district to district. They won't have holes. There's a lot of focus on college and career readiness. More information and standards based on the contributions of Minnesota's American Indian tribes and communities. Technology and informational literacy. There has been more emphasis on financial literacy, personal finance and economics, and geographic information systems.
One of the things that they've done with the standards is taken what does a college and career readiness person look like? And then they've taken that and then they've back mapped to see how does that fall out in each grade level, which is how they come up with the standards in our grade levels.
So a few other shifts at the state level. There are fewer standards and benchmarks overall, and they now have these large foundational anchor standards, which I will share with you in a moment. And that then allows all of the specific skills and content area to fall into one of those 4 areas. And with that, there's a better integration of all the social studies disciplines in K-8. And again, there's that focus on citizenship, college and career readiness, and concepts and skills that prepare students for life in a more globally technologically connected world. So here are those 4 anchor standards. Everything will fall under these 4 areas. There's citizenship and government, economics, geography, and history. And I really like their graphic and the use of that college and career ready in the middle there with the inquiry, critical thinking, problem solving, and communication. So all the work that the students do will fall into one of these 4 areas.
Which is very different from the way our standards are currently. They don't have all 4 of these areas in each grade level. There's a focus in each grade level.
Right now. So here are some of the notable shifts for our elementary students. There's heavy emphasis on economics in 2nd grade. It is at a 2nd grade level. I know a lot of people see that. Ancient civilizations will be a large change for 3rd grade this year, or next year, excuse me. Geography in 4th grade, and American history up to 1800 in the 5th grade. And then in all grade levels, K-5, there is an increased visibility and inclusion of American Indian standards. So here's just a general sort of sequence of study. Again, you can see those 4 foundational anchor categories for social studies. The citizenship and government, economics, geography, and history shows up here again. And in grades K through 3, there's a balance between all 4 of those all year in those grade levels. And then starting in 4th grade, there's a focus area. So they still will learn and have skills and concepts in all 4 of those foundational areas, but there's an emphasis. So 4th grade, again, will be geography of North America, and 5th grade will be the history of North America up to 1800. And then you can kind of see the progression up through 12th grade.
So here's an example of a 4th grade standard. Gives you an idea. We actually take, instead of the standards, we take the benchmarks. The standards are kind of an overarching kind of a theory, and we take the benchmarks and actually prioritize those. So this is an example of how teachers are able to have the opportunity now to teach the American legal system, including the federally recognized Indian nations, that they have sovereign power and they're separate and independent from the federal and state governments. So this is an area where we're going to be able to work with our Indian Ed department to do a lot of PD on this kind of thing for our teachers and say, can you know, so our teachers are more knowledgeable in that area. The next example that you have up there is, the first one is a grade 3 literacy informational text standard, where it's talking about describing a relationship and pertains to time, sequences, and cause and effect. And then if you go down to the historical thinking skills, this is a part of a 3rd grade social studies standard, where it's asking to compare and contrast time and space. So you can see where they're using similar language with compare and contrast and describing, and all of those things are starting to align. So we can take literacy standards, build in the social studies standards, and teach those things at the same time. So in closing, we hope that we were able to introduce you to the new Minnesota Social Studies standards, give you a short version of the new vision, and bring an awareness to the shifts and changes in the new standards. And we are ready for questions and comments.
Yes, Director Bergstrom.
First of all, hello. First of all, let me say thanks for coming, Beth, and Elida. I'm close. I'll get there. Give me a year. I remember when I was in carpentry, and an architect would hand me a design and say, "Here, make this happen." It took me a while to digest it and look it over and see if it can happen. So if the teachers in the district are carpenters and we're handing them this design, are they embracing it? Are they waiting until the architects leave the room to say what they really think? What do the teachers think about the new curriculum?
I think our teachers are pretty excited. I'm thinking back to a specific meeting that we had with our steering team, and our 5th grade teachers were saying, look at the language here. Our secondary cohorts talk about those standards as what they would call skill standards. So they're seeing the same language in our social studies standards as they're seeing in our English language arts standards, like the compare and the contrast. And they're saying we can integrate these things and it doesn't have to be standalone anymore. So they're very excited about that concept of being able to dovetail the two together.
Thanks. I'm glad to hear that they're excited about it.
I think they are. I think it's going to be a challenge for some of the content, like ancient civilizations coming to 3rd grade is going to be a little bit of a tough, we just need to.
We don't want to make it too easy.
Right.
Are there other questions? Then we have a resolution before us to vote on. You ready for the vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And it carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Good work. We now have some follow-up formalities from some earlier votes we've taken to authorize bond issuance. We have done that now, and we need to have a formal resolution that is ratifying the bids received and accepted. And terminology is in front of you. Is there a motion? Director Bergstrom.
Chair, be it resolved that the School Board of Independent School District Number 271 approve the attached resolution ratifying the award of the sale, determining the form and details, authorizing the execution, delivery, and registration, and providing for the payment of $16,275,000 General Obligation Alternative Facilities Bonds, Series 2013A.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and at the table is Rod Zivkovich, Executive Director of Finance and Support Services, in order to inform us further and respond to any discussion.
Chair Culver, Superintendent Fujitaki, board members. I'm here tonight with Gary Olson from Ehlers and Associates. Also, Joel Sutter from Ehlers is also with us tonight. As Chair Culver mentioned, these are resolutions just to conform the ratification of what was agreed to by the board at the last meeting on the 29th.
Do any members have questions? I want to acknowledge the fact that Director Bergstrom was able to be here in order to take care of the board liaison responsibilities. So he was present for the opening of the bids or accepting the bid, and signed off on documents as a representative for the board. Is that how it went?
I hope I spelled your name right.
No, I hope you didn't use my name. So thank you for being able to do that when I couldn't attend. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries. And the next resolution then on the other bonding. Director Hibbs.
Resolved that the School Board of Independent School District Number 271 approve the attached resolution ratifying the award of the sale, determining the form and details, authorizing the execution, delivery, and registration, and providing for the payment of general obligation school building refunding bonds, Series 2013B.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and this is the resolution which authorizes, as it calls it, refunding, that we save on interest by doing this. And Mr. Zivkovich.
Chair Culver, I think with this one I'll turn it over to Gary Olson to explain a little more about the refunding and the very good results of that refunding.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Fujitaki, this is something we've been tracking for quite a while. About 3 years ago, we put together a list of all the bonds that were still outstanding and when they would be able to be refunded under the various rules and regulations that the federal government sets. This is the first of 3. We'll have one this year. We'll have one next fall, in the fall of 14, and another one in the fall of 15 that'll all be eligible to be refunded or refinanced. These are all bonds that were part of the 1999 election and that big project, and all these bonds have already been refunded once, and now we're on the second refunding on these. But again, this is not a kind of an isolated event. It's part of this overall plan for financing that the district is looking at that includes the alt facility bonds you just approved and the future alt facility bonds, this and the capital projects levy. They're all kind of put together in a comprehensive plan to be able, for the district to be able to finance and do the things they want to do and yet control the property tax impact on those. But we did get a lot of bids. We were very happy. We had 11 bids on these bonds and 10 bids on the other bonds, so great interest from, and if you look at the list, you can see that they're from all over the country, from New York and all over the country, different companies bidding on your bonds. We did save over, if you remember, your resolution called for $1.1 million in savings and an 8% percentage of debt service refunding. The actual results were over $1.5 million, and the percentage was 10.93%. Was the present value of refunded debt service, so well above the the targets that the board had set, although we said when we did those that we were being conservative, but very happy with the results and good time to sell bonds. So, and again, this fits into the plan. For the majority of the savings on this one have been scheduled to come off of this fall's levy as part of being able to, if the voters approve the capital projects levy, we'll still be able to maintain that level debt service or debt tax rates.
Say that again, how much money are we saving?
Over $1.5 million, $1,520,000.
Thank you. And we are not refinancing in terms of extending the length of a loan in doing this. We are still looking to terminate at the original end date.
The final bond matures in 2020 under the original schedule, and the final bond matures in 2020 under this schedule.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for tracking that opportunity and bringing it forward to us when the time was right to save money for the district. We appreciate it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and it carries. So, thank you, and thank you for being here tonight, both of you. And our last item of business then, under our Part B agenda, number 5, is titled Financing Plans for School Safety and Security and Technology. And this is not an action item, but an information item.
Correct. Chair Culver, Superintendent Fujitaki, board members, this is a follow-up to our presentation on the 29th about the financing plan. We have updated some numbers and some information for the board, and we'd like to take you through that presentation and then take if there's any additional questions or information that you would be looking for. As the chair mentioned, this is to present financial plan for funding our safe schools, security, and technology plans. We're not looking for any board action this evening. We'll come back on Monday the 28th with some final costs and estimates of our financing plan, and at that meeting we'll be looking for the board to make some recommendation or decision on this funding plan for safety and security. If you look at the overall over the 10-year period of time, what we're looking at is $60 million. Of that, $10 million would be spent on safety and security, $50 million on technology. In the first 3 years, that'd be split more like a $2 million for safety and security and $4 million for technology. So what is the overall financing plan? Well, the financing plan is we would ask the voters to seek an additional $3.3 million, or a total of $6 million in a no tax increase capital projects levy. Currently, we're at $2.7 million, and that voter-approved referendum expires in 2018. The concept is a no tax impact referendum. It's utilizing savings from refunding, just like Gary mentioned just before, the $1.5 million, and then employ periodic adjustments to the levy and debt management. And what that is as he mentioned about, we have 2 more bonds coming up for refinancing over the next couple years, and then also looking at when we need to sell debt for the alt facility projects is layering those different debt payments over a period of time to keep the tax impact flat. We brought this information to the CFAC committee, explained, both had this presentation of technology, the presentation of safety and security, and explained our financing plan to the board. Director Hibbs was there, and so was Director Bush, and the CFAC supports the financing plan. So just looking at a very high level impact of this on a $200,000 house, the current levy cost to that homeowner is $53. The proposed would be $118. We showed the savings of the 2005 bonds, the $1.5 million, and we'll be updating this. This was when we were thinking it'd be $1.2 million, is a savings of $26. We would have to make an additional to other levies, such as our alt facilities or other levies, of $40, and there would be no net change. The statement down below kind of lays out our overall processes. The district is committed to making a reduction of other tax levies if a ballot question is approved, and the reduction would be made to alternative facilities of non-bonded levies in those areas. So kind of looking at the timetable that we're looking at, there's really two big things that need to be done. One is a review and comment, which once the district decides to move forward with the plan on technology and safety and security, it'll take us about 30 days to work with our consultants and the rest to put together a review and the comment that the state has to review. The review from the state usually takes around 60 days, and I think Gary has a little more information on that one also.
Legally, the department has to give you a response within 60 days. One of the problems right now is that the gentleman that did review and comment retired in January. He's, on their behalf, been willing to come back and work 1 day a week to try and help with the backload until they get somebody in to replace him. That section of the department is, by most people's standards, probably manned already, and so we're a little concerned sometimes about how fast the department will be able to react. Obviously, they've got that 60-day statutory deadline, but some kinds of programs you get the information back quickly, sometimes you don't, but we just want to make sure that we have enough time out there so we get that back in time to meet some of the other requirements in terms of publishing the review and comment once you get it back from the department, and all those kinds of things that you need to do if you want to have a legal election.
The next item is, by statutory requirement, the board needs to adopt a resolution by August 23rd. What the recommendation is that we adopt a resolution by June 1st to allow adequate time to prepare for this process, and mainly the review and comment and making sure that gets through. So that kind of our overall where we're at with the plan. Just at this point in time, would ask the board if there's any additional information you'd need before the 28th meeting for us to help you with this decision.
Board members, you've been asked the question. If there's further information, this is your opportunity for questions. Director Bergstrom.
Just a quick one. Thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate you being here. I'm looking at the funding needs over 10 years. Sorry, I don't have the slides numbered, but it says first 3 years split, $2 million a year for safety and security and $4 million a year for technology. Does the $2 million get us where we need to be, or where we think we need to be for the safety and security?
It'll take us to the, as you remember with Director Kaufman mentioned earlier about that we need about $6.8 million. We figured that it'd be over about 3-year period of time to 4-year period of time. The majority of the items are in the first couple of years, and then it's more of replacement and some of the other items after that point in time. So yes, we should be able to handle the majority of the construction pieces in the first few years.
Good, thank you.
Yes, Director Amlin.
In that Department of Education review and comment, what are they looking for?
They're looking, you have to describe what you're going to do with the money, how you're going to spend it, and what they're looking at is the statute does require you to spend it in certain areas. It has to be capital items. You know, you're not going to be funding teachers out of that, or salaries for teachers or those kinds of things. So they're looking at making sure that what you're doing, whether, And, you know, on the bottom line, when you get a review and comment back, what it says is that the commissioners determined that it's educationally and economically viable. But what they're looking for is to make sure that all the things that you've got in that plan are consistent with that statute in terms of how you can spend that money and what you're going to do with it.
Yes, Director Hibbs?
With respect to the review and comment, what happens if they don't get it done in the 60 days?
I don't know if have we ever run into a situation where we usually get it within 60 days, but Joel, have you run into that?
Mr. Chair and board members, we have run into that situation, and sometimes they extend the deadline sometimes by asking for additional information or asking for a change, and then they extend the deadline. So that has happened. I think there's sufficient time built into this timeline, though. If you submit the review and or the board approves the review and comment by June 1st and submit by roughly June 1st, you don't have to have that back before you vote to authorize the election. You have to have it back to publish at least 20 days prior to the election. So that would mean in October sometime you'd have to publish it. So we have lots of time built in.
And I think we've provided the district with kind of a general overall timeline with some of those key dates on that. And in terms of the publication of that review and comment, it has to be at least 20 days, but not more than 60 days ahead of the election. So there's time if they're a little bit late, and that's again why you want to start early and not wait till the last second.
So given their staffing bottleneck, you wouldn't anticipate us having any problems?
No, not if you submit by June 1st or so.
And I guess as a district, when we submitted our all facilities review and comment, we were kind of waiting and waiting and waiting. So we just are trying to have enough lead time so that we don't run into any problems if there are issues.
Okay. I guess the other more significant issue for me is I'm just having a little bit of trouble with both of these initiatives. With respect to safety and security, and I realize it's all being driven by the finances and the need to go out to levy, but the safety and security issues, that only seems like half the issue, because the other half of the issue in my mind is how do we address safety and security issues that begin with our students. And you know, I think we've had a little bit of discussion at this table about that's less about structural improvements. It's more about having more counselors, having more psychologists, addressing, you know, the human factors that are at play here. And I'd feel a whole lot better if I understood that part of the equation, how we intend to address that. And I know that in Mr. Kaufman's presentation that the last two recommendations spoke to creating task forces to look at some of those things, but I'd like to understand a little better where we think that may be headed and what the financial ramifications of that are, because obviously that's got to come out of operating funds. So that would give me a little bit better picture. I also mentioned, because these two issues were presented to the labor management group this last week, and I asked that group, because they represent our staff, you know, well, what are your thoughts about this? What are your concerns? And I didn't get a lot of feedback there, but I would say there was somewhat they had a lot of questions about it, and so because those are the people that are on the ground, and you know, they have to deal with the technology, and they are the ones who, along with our students, are in our buildings, so safety and security is important to them as well. I'd really like to hear more from our staff in terms of the efficacy of these two initiatives, in terms of our mission. And I don't know if that's something that can be brought to bear before we have to vote on this. Similarly, with respect to technology, I still have questions there about efficacy. And I have questions about access, and I don't know whether we'll be able to address those in a more definitive way by the end of the month, but that's a big deal. I mean, we heard just with respect to this report on our American Indian population that with respect to mobility of students and some of those things, that creates a pretty significant issue with respect to technology and access. So those are my concerns, and I guess I'd like to see some of those issues fleshed out a little better before it's time to be voting on these financial issues.
Director Ablin.
I too have some concerns about these two issues. I think I've said it from the very beginning. I have a difficult time putting these two issues on the same ballot. It's not that I'm against both of them, for sure not against the safety one, but I'm wondering why they have to be placed in one question. Why can't we ask the question to the voting public, or do you wish to approve the technology issue and the money? And do you wish to approve the money for safety? Why can't we divide this? It's in my history as a legislator way back when, I always had to kind of hold my nose when I voted for something I was avidly for, but I always had to bring in something I didn't want. Same thing is happening with the tax issue right now. If you listen to the legislature, there are things that are just great and there are things that people don't want, but they're together. Do we have to have one vote, one question on the ballot, or can we divide this?
We could divide. I can answer that question. We could have two questions on the ballot. What we'll have on the 29th of this month is we'll have Bill Morris from Decision Resources come to address the board about that question. Bill Morris has helped us in past referendums. He's a surveyor, a researcher, and surveyor. We have 4 components to what we're proposing to the board. The 2 plans would be technology and safety security. You've heard those 2 plans. Tonight you're hearing the financing plan. The 4th leg would be the community readiness plan. And that's going to be presented by Bill Morris. Rick Kaufman's helping set that up to talk about this. Rick, would you like to add?
Can you tell me what you mean by community readiness? Is that?
I'll let Rick talk about that.
Having worked on 7 school referendums in the last 23 years, and I think Bill will concur with this, when you ask multiple questions, the likelihood of multiple questions passing decreases the more questions you have. There sometimes is the appearance and/or a strategy that's employed by school districts to have multiple questions as possibly question 2 or 3 a throwaway for the sake of at least passing the one that the school district wants. I wouldn't recommend that we go multiple questions for the simple fact that both of these are what the school district, at least administration, is making recommendation to the board to address specific needs in both technology and safety and security. With respect to readiness, what Bill Morris also will concur, and I've worked with Bill for quite a few years, is that we need time to be able to, not only the MDE to do their review and comment, but to do an adequate informational campaign to our voting public. Bloomington voters have among the highest turnout of communities of like size, so we can expect at least this fall of a 30 to 36% turnout, voter turnout. That is a sizable task on the school district and a citizens committee to put together adequate information in a timely fashion and share that. If we can, quote unquote, plant the seed before parents leave for vacation, summer vacation, so once they check out, there's really no checking back in until mid to late August when they're buying supplies for their students. Our window of opportunity to then share information becomes very limited.
How many questions did we have at the last time we went to the voting public? Wasn't it 3?
The last time we had 2 questions, and they were technology-specific levy and an operational levy.
And it had to be 2
Yes.
questions.
They had to be
Which
2
they
questions.
had to be separate.
Right.
2 different.
One was general fund and the other was capital?
Capital, correct. Which is also a challenge of helping our electorate understand the difference between operational and capital. In this particular case, it is just capital.
So it's your recommendation that we keep it as one, but feasibly and logistically and legally, we could divide them.
Mr. Chair, if I could just mention one minor problem with that, this plan where for the first 3 years you spend more of the money on a higher percentage of the money on safety and security, and then later years a lower percentage. If they were separate questions, each dedicated to a specific purpose, you wouldn't have that flexibility. Each one would be roughly the same amount each year. There'd be one implementation challenge of that strategy.
Does that need to be spelled out in the authorization request to the Department of Education as well? Do we actually give an annual budget for each year then of this capital levy, or do we actually have some flexibility after it's been passed?
You have to have a plan for each year for how you're going to spend it. I don't think you have to follow the plan exactly. The purposes stated in the review and comment, though, have to be followed. And on the ballot. The ballot will state the purposes for which the funds will be spent.
As the slide shared, we would 2 million towards technology, or I'm sorry, 4 million technology, 2 million safety and security. That's the general finance figure.
I think also the challenge that's out there is that we are proposing having a revoke the current levy that's out there and replace it with a different one. So basically what you want to end up with at the end of this is you don't want to have anything less than you already have. And so it gets a little more confusing when you have 2 questions with one pot of money that you're trying to split up.
Chair.
Yes, Director Hibbs.
I just wanted to let Director Ablin know that the CFAC committee did discuss that issue at some length, and the consensus was that it would be better to have one question, that it would be more likely that we'd pass both issues that way.
Well, I'll grant you that it'll most likely pass easier if you put them together, but there are people in the voting public that might be 100% for safety and lukewarm at best for technology and putting a computer in every student's hand. So they have that right to, in my mind, they have the right to say yes to safety and no to technology, or yes and yes, or no and no. So that's what I'm after. In my general discussions with the voting public that I've had in my limited experience here is that there is no question safety is a given. I think that would pass big. But the comments I'm getting about technology and a computer in every student's hands is iffy at best.
Further questions or discussion?
No, just a comment. I share the same thought of definitely. I think we can all agree of how important it is when we talk about safety and security, and you know that we all care for our students, for staff, for our schools. I still have a hard time with the technology piece as well, because I'm looking at the amount of money that it's going to be spent in this plan, and seeing, as a teacher, seeing the needs in the classroom, it just kind of hurts a little bit. I know that there are teachers and administrators that are all for, yeah, technology, it's the way to go. But we all teachers, because our areas are so different, we all have different needs. As it might work great for math and for reading, it works in a different way for other areas. And so I like to see more money coming, yeah, but I like to see it in the classroom, and that's the part that I struggle with.
Yes, Superintendent.
I want to clarify something. This money can only be used for that purpose. And we're already at our cap as far as the operating referendum. So you're aware of that?
I am
This money.
aware of it.
Excuse me, we're at our cap for what?
The operating referendum.
Operating, okay.
So we can't get any more dollars for operations. And if the property values had stayed what it is, we would be getting $4 million right now off for technology. So in some respects, we're not asking anything more than what the voters have already approved for the technology piece. But because the property values have gone down, we're only getting $2.7 million. We started with 3, it's gone down to 2.7. If property values had increased by 5% a year, we'd be about $4 million a year right now for technology. Exactly what we're proposing to spend for the upcoming year.
Yeah, I must not have been paying close attention at some point during presentation here. I'm going back to a slide, just asking a question about the duration of the levy. We have our technology levy authorized through 2018.
Correct.
Correct. Would this vote then in December or in November extend that to a later date?
Yes, it would. It would send it to 2014.
So this would be a 10-year?
2024, excuse me.
It'll be a 10-year.
10-year
Yeah.
authorization.
And that's the maximum we can ask for on
Okay.
capital
Yeah.
projects.
But that also is an important feature, I think, then as well, is that we are at least reauthorizing what it is that we intended to do with the long-term technology plan. We're also layering in some additional features here in terms of utilizing hardware and accessing the internet throughout the community in different ways that weren't anticipated a number of years ago when this plan was originally put forward. And then that is this, the amount that would be used for safety and security then is just from the first 2 years.
No, it's target $10 million over that 10 years. $2 million each year for the first 3 years.
All right.
The
And then
the remainder would be
declining
to address the the task force that would not necessarily be tied to funding of staff, because you cannot fund staff for capital projects, but maintenance, replacement costs, things of that nature.
for safety purposes.
Correct. The technology on safety and security measures, like security cameras and manual alarm systems, change fairly rapidly. 5 to 10 years of shelf life on most of those.
Why would we need a higher level of funding for technology if we buy equipment with it in the first year and 2 years? Then what happens with the additional authorization going forward?
The majority of the cost the first 2 years is addressing the physical structure changes.
Right. And then after that, the need for safety and security would actually decline, so the amount available for technology would increase. But what would we be using it for at that point? Why would we need $5 million a year for technology once we already have the hardware in hand?
I think Mr. Weiser can best explain that one.
Like I said, maybe I was just phased out a little bit on this, but these questions are just occurring to me now as we're getting close to the vote to say, what does that really imply then, where we're limping along now on 2.7 million, but we're looking to authorize up to $5 million in the future. What does that go for?
So the $4.1 million that you saw in the proposal, it's an average number over a 5-year period, extrapolated then in the finance plan to be a 10-year period. So roughly it's $4 million extrapolated. We talk about existing existing classroom technologies that are in, that we would continue forward. So there's smart boards, for instance, we're getting to a level of smart boards that is satisfying our classroom needs. As those age out of the system, there will be either the replacement of those smart boards or whatever technology replaces those. That's not part of a Next Technologies for Learning initiative. It's not part of putting a Chromebook in the hands of every student. So there are some carryover priorities that already exist. Plus the way this project is structured, it comes in a wave in the first, we're talking about changing processes, we're talking about reorienting how we deal with the educational process and the digitization of curriculum. And that has a higher expense in the first couple of years and a lower expense extended over time as it becomes part of our normal practice. When you take the cumulative effect and stretch it, that comes out to be a $4 million need, but we're going to be creative about financing to meet the needs early and then sustain them throughout. It's kind of a long answer to get to your question, but the needs come in waves, basically. And what you're seeing in a $4 million figure is the average.
And I'd like to add that, as you notice with our current levy that we have out there, it has the ability to be able to have a fund balance to carry the money over to future years to plan, which is part of the reason we were able to do a phone system, $1 million phone system, without having to look for other funds or look for operating funds to be able to do that. So some of the dollars in the latter years would also be for preparing for a new initiative or any initiative that is coming down the road. We've not shown, and John under his leadership has not shown use of the money unless there is a plan to use that money.
So in layering the portable devices into the technology system that we currently have, there are not plans to decommission apples in the schools then. We're still going to be supporting all of that equipment in the computer labs and so forth, or are we going to be able to close down some computer labs because we have an alternative that students would use?
The environment will absolutely change over a long period of time. That happens inevitably. We're doing a pilot next year, for instance, with doing some of the required testing on laptops in our middle schools. So currently we have a laptop and cart, a cart and lab model of technology implementation. It gets us to a 1-to-3 computer to student ratio. We're talking about moving most of our schools to a 1-to-1 computer ratio, a pivot, and in that 1-to-1 environment, our labs as necessary. They're necessary for a few things, for some heavy lifting, for some state testing perhaps. Our laptop carts that are pushed down the hallway and distributed into classrooms necessary, not likely. So that landscape will change just inevitably as it has. I think I've said this before this group before. I think we're at the high point in terms of the number of computers we have in labs and classrooms and carts right now. Those numbers will go down in a 1-to-1 environment.
Okay, I'm getting it.
Yeah.
Other questions, reactions? Superintendent.
Question to ask of the board about what other information the board would need. Board Member Hibbs brought up 2 questions, 2 bits of information. One would be mental health, what we're doing, and Director Kaufman shared in the past that he was proposing a task force to address this. The task force concepts of how that's going to be processed is still being developed.
Mm-hmm.
The monies from this capital projects levy cannot be used to pay for staffing, mental health staffing. I want to be clear about that. It can only be used for capital projects and type items, and that's defined by state statute. And staffing is one of those items. As far as the efficacy of our technology plan, that's been covered before. If you can be more specific about what you need, you talked about efficacy and access.
Well, so I'd like a little more detail about access. I know we're working in that direction, but if we could be more definitive about what we think it's going to take.
And John Weiser shared the five-point plan that he has developed. And John, would you like to share that again, please?
I'll take you back to March when we, one of the focus of that presentation was the access questions that had come up in the previous, or in the first presentation. I talked at that time about kind of a menu of options, and they went from the least costly to the most costly. They would include looking at our existing resources, using them in a different way. For instance, keeping media centers open longer after school. It goes up to measures like Wi-Fi pucks that students could check out from the media center as they're going home for a short period of time, or if they qualify for a longer period of time. Schools would author how that type of implementation would work. I shared budget information about the number of pucks that we had budgeted given our current pilot. So we have budgeted 170 pucks in that, given the budget that you saw. A couple of layers in between there are about partnerships. They're about going out into the community where we have recognized higher concentrations of access need, creating partnerships. So the example that I used, and a couple of folks that were here, Nelson, Madrid, talked about our relationship with the Georgetown apartment complex. We've had staff out there who've looked at the homework room. We're in the process of implementing a Wi-Fi access point in that homework room for the residents of that facility. I don't have, right off the top of my head, I don't have the budget for how much we've dedicated to that partnership effort, but it's something like growing X number of partnerships per year and then sustaining them over time. So something between, I'm going to estimate this like 5 partnerships per year, or 10 partnerships per year, growing 5 to 10 more per year over that period of time to address the need. And then the last of those options was, if there is a concentrated need like an apartment complex, the most intensive effort would be to go up on the 4 poles on the corners of that apartment complex, put external ruggedized access points that's connected back to the Bloomington network, and basically create a mesh network over a 1 to 5 block area based on the concentration and need. And we have a budget there to, to build and maintain, and I don't have that number immediately at my disposal.
Maybe the question I need you to answer is, are we committed to making sure that every student that has one of these devices will be able to access the internet over Wi-Fi in their home?
So it's very difficult to make a promise of 100%. So what I would say is, we are committed to identifying the need and meeting the need where we can. So right now, for instance, as this dialogue has progressed, we have a survey out among our 5 secondary student populations. I think there's roughly 600 responses from 5 secondary schools. That's corroborating what we already thought, which is there's about a 5% access problem as they identified. The specific question is, if your school gave you a laptop computer to carry home with you every day, how easy would it be to get on the internet to do homework? and then several measures. It would be very easy, it would be doable, it would be a little bit complicated, it would be impossible. And if you combine those bottom two categories, that it would be very difficult or impossible, that is showing a 5% need. That corroborates what we saw in the community survey from last fall, and it corroborates what we saw in another student survey about a year and a half ago. Because this survey is student-specific, we actually are putting those, what I say is pins on a map, so we know where students live. We can take this survey data and we have GIS information around those addresses, and so we have a map on which there will be pins of various colors, yellow and red and green for go. And that's our process for identifying the need and then looking at whether those are concentrations, whether they're single entities, and so on. So that's our process. That's the menu of solutions we're offering to get to as close as we can to that 100% goal.
Did you say you're going to be asked? Oh, sorry.
Superintendent Fujitaki wanted to respond also, if you'll give him an opportunity.
John, you've asked this access question to other districts that have implemented one-to-one device rollouts, haven't you? And what's been the response?
Yeah, so part of that prior presentation was also a white paper, and it was about 6 or 8 pages long. It's in the board documents, and in it was the findings that we took from other districts, neighboring districts. It was one of the questions board members had. We feel like we have the most comprehensive approach to dealing with the access question than other districts who've been on this one-to-one path. Many of our other districts, they quote national statistics or they quote state statistics, and we use some of those as well. We use the census data as our basement, you know, our worst case scenario. But we wanted to get localized data. Most of them, it's really a difficult problem to solve, and so we're digging in deep because we recognize the importance of it. And we're doing more comprehensive work than any other district that I know of.
I don't doubt that, but my concern is I don't want to leave 500 students behind with respect to technology. I don't want somebody from the Office of Educational Equity coming into this room, you know, in the next 5 years saying, well, the reason this group of students is lagging is because they don't have consistent access to technology like the other 9,500 students. So I realize that we're, you know, you've got lots of alternatives to try to address this, but I think I, for one, need some certainty that we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that, you know, we don't leave 500 or 250 or 100 students behind, if at all possible. And I know you know that.
Right.
I know you're doing everything you can. And I feel like we're in
the same place.
But I'm looking for some answers as opposed to, well, you know, here's some of the things we're thinking about. I'd like us to nail that down and say, we can do it, and this is what we need to do it, and this is how much it's going to cost, and that either upsets our plans or it doesn't upset our plans.
Exactly, the homeless.
And I would say that is the plan that I've laid out. I've stated how we're going to identify the problem. I've stated the variety of ways we're going to address the problem. Each of those methods has a budget attached to it. And then it's a matter of implementation, which until we have a chance to implement, it's going to be hard to say there will be no problem in the future. But I have a high degree of confidence that we're dealing with the access issue in a serious way, and that if we have the resources to deal with it, the menu of options that we're looking to apply to the problem will meet that goal.
But part of your plan, as you just identified, relies on partners, and perhaps providing access through some of those partners. Do we have any idea who some of those partners realistically might be? And if for some reason, you know, none of the partnerships work out, what's the contingency then? Is that just mean that we have to buy more pucks, or?
It could mean that. I mean, it could mean that that we reapply resources as we learn through this implementation. Each of those areas, you know, we have pilot projects in each of those areas. So these pucks are being used right now across the 3 middle schools. You can go in as a middle school student and check one out from the media center. You can try it out. We have other parts of our organization we can lean on as well, through the family engagement programs at our elementaries, through identifying other identifying students in some other way, through our OEE representatives or through our student-teacher conferences or so on.
If everything, worst case scenario, your first 4 approaches don't pan out and you gotta buy pucks for everybody, is that a deal breaker?
I would say, you know, so the best plan is always a flexible plan. So if we were to take all of the other initiatives and put the money into pucks, we would significantly improve the puck budget. and the insurance behind any of these initiatives or any of these solutions is they're not singular solutions. So we have 2 other pucks, for instance, that we're also piloting. One of which is instead of $40 a month comes in at $20 a month, and one that comes in at $10 a month. And so as the technology landscape changes, you can take a 170 puck solution and you can turn it into a 340 puck solution with just the technology change that can take place. And you can double that again into a 680 puck solution if the technology just takes one more iteration or we find a provider that can meet our needs.
So realistically, what's the timetable to get answers to those kind of questions?
I would be challenged to know, I guess what I might ask for is a set of written questions to which I could provide written responses. I feel like in this environment, I feel like I'm providing the steps of a plan and the solutions that we are proposing, but I'm hearing you say that the answers that I'm giving aren't satisfactory.
When would you expect to be able to go live with this, the whole initiative? In other words, we're turning this system on when?
We have pilots with the pucks right now, for instance, and so given budget, if we had the budget, we would, in fall of 2014, the first year that this, what we call year 1, each of the middle schools would have the puck solution applied. We would have full surveys in place so that on day 1 of school, that the middle schools who are in that first layer of implementation have digital content, that's component 1. They have access, that's component 2, and they have that parents and students have the right data available to them in electronic ways. We're talking about pathways to the hub, we're talking about grades and attendance and so on. The goal is day 1, we don't give a device without good purpose and understanding behind it.
But we have a good year here to look to resolve some of these questions in terms of where we need additional access points for our students.
Right.
So if that's a priority, we can start checking out the geography of where our partners may be and work to solve it.
We're going down the path to approve it from a financial standpoint, and I would just like to make sure that we've kind of dotted the i's and crossed the t's and made a commitment to providing access to all of our students, not 95% of our students or 99% of our students, if that's what it is. The other issue with respect to efficacy is I would like to hear from the teachers, because one of the comments I have heard as this dialogue's been going on is that some teachers are a little bit apprehensive about this because it looks like another initiative on their plate, and they feel like they've got lots of initiatives on their plate, and I want to make sure that if we're going to spend all this money on technology that by and large as a group they've bought into it, and that they're going to be they're going to be excited about it and gung-ho and ready to make the most of it. just to respond to your question about security, again, what I'm looking for there is, I realize we can't pay for staffing with this money, so the question would be, have we ever had any discussions about, in an ideal world, or in a somewhat ideal world, how many counselors and psychologists might we like to have in our buildings? How much would that cost us, and where would that money come from? I mean, that's the issue is, all right, let's just say, you know, one more counselor, one more psychologist in each of the secondary buildings. Okay, there's a dollar amount attached to that. If that's the decision that was made, where would we find that money?
I don't know. Based upon what the legislature is planning to give us right now, they're not even covering our cost of living increases. And this is for the biennium. This is going to be a major challenge for balancing our budgets for future years. So I don't know where these additional dollars would come from to pay for additional staffing like that.
My concern is simply that we've got half of a safety and security plan. It addresses the structural improvements that we need to make to our buildings, but there's a staffing part to safety and security, and I don't want that to get left behind.
And I would challenge that it doesn't, Mr. Hibbs, as we shared the last time, the task force would look at the issues that you're talking about. You make assumptions that we don't know what our current staffing is for social workers, guidance counselors, and psychologists. Before we can look at what comprehensive approach we have to mental health, we have to know where we're at right now and where we're going. To jump to a conclusion that we don't know what we're doing before we vote, that's the purpose of the task force. Again, I'll go back to what I shared the last time. We've provided clarity as much as we can at this point in time. I can't give you either how much it would cost or what the outcomes of the task force, the recommendations will be. That's part of the task force, both for after school as well as mental health.
Well, as you heard the superintendent, though, he doesn't know where the money would come from, and that's my concern, is that we will go down the path of approving this, we'll make the structural improvements, and then we'll say, well, that's all we can do, and that concerns me. And so I'd like us to also be having the conversation about, to do this right, we need this many additional bodies, and that's going to cost us this much, and you know, here's how we think we can pay for that.
In some conversations with Mr. Belby, our staffing is actually higher than our neighboring districts and in the metro area. The question is are they doing the right work? Are our school psychologists doing the right work, or are they spending an inordinate amount of time on special education identification? There is a recent report came out, or a recent white paper actually just came out last week, a consolidated effort of collaboration with the National Association of School Psychologists, social workers, a number of different groups to talk about learning supports. Many of the things in that white paper, I've not been through the complete document, addresses some of the things that we're already doing in the district in PBIS, RTI, and on our staffing. So again, I want to be clear that the public watching in the audience understands that the intent is to address that. It was brought up by our staff in that area. It was not, by and large, brought up by any parents. It was brought up by those staff members that are most acute to the issue at hand: psychologists, social workers, guidance counselors.
And we're bringing up this because we have an opportunity, because of the financing plan that's been developed, to address the needs as far as our facilities to improve safety. We have an opportunity this year, next year, because of the savings that we have, we can do it this year. This is the year to do that. This is the window of opportunity to address the facility needs. And that's already been processed by the team, and that's what we're proposing here. This other process to address the mental health issues and the after-school issues is another process, and we'd have to, once we come up with a plan, we're going to have to come back to the board and say, here's what it's going to take to do this. As I said, you come up with a plan, then you have to come up with a financing plan, and it may mean, well, there's no referendum opportunity for that. It would just be that we'd have to look within if that's the board's priority.
I will send you some questions in writing that you can respond to.
Okay.
Hopefully before the end of the month.
Director Corman.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I just have a question. Going back to access, John, did you say the survey would be for students or for parents?
The current survey we have is student survey.
Okay. Have we considered asking parents instead? Or is that both that go included in that? Is that how it works?
Well, it's more difficult to roll out a survey with parents, but we're trying to measure the problem early in this process to see if we need to budget for a 5% problem or a 15% problem. So our first estimate at that, or what we want to corroborate, is what we believe to be the problem, and the way to do that is to ask teachers or tech media folks in our 5 buildings to have their students take a survey. You might imagine that it would be much more difficult to try to reach out to 600 families and have them take a survey, because 600 families don't gather in classrooms every day.
Are we talking about middle schoolers and high schoolers?
Right now, we're looking at the secondary, middle schoolers and high schoolers, and because they span the entire district, they're representative of the far boundaries of the entire district.
I ask you because I would be concerned about how accurate the responses would be. Because if you're asking them, if we give you a device like this, how possible would it be for you to have access from home? If I am a middle schooler, I'd probably say, yes, it is very easy. Because I want to have one of those. And I can get access somewhere else, at my friend's house or any other place. So I'll be concerned about how accurate that is, and I'd rather much have the answer from the parent. We parents receive tons of surveys, and we can work on one more. I know it's difficult, but I would be a little bit concerned about the accuracy of the response there.
So a point that might reassure you is that the data that we're collecting now in the last 3 weeks corroborates the community data survey that was done a couple of months ago, and that was a parent survey.
And you remember we increased the number of parents we surveyed to get a more statistically significant accounting of parents around all of the questions, but the technology questions, and it aligns very much. So surveys, again, it's just one of many tools that we're looking at to assess what are our issues, what are our needs, and how do we address them.
And my other question is about music. When it comes to music and the kind of help that they can get in the classroom, our music department is always struggling with budget and instruments every single year, and covering the cost of replacing or fixing instruments. And I'm wondering, when the kids have the Chromebooks, do those help somehow to also have access to music practice somehow, or have you looked at maybe something else that would probably help music teachers in the classroom and students to get into another level of practice using technology?
So I can speak to that anecdotally. Our intent is that this is a digital, this is an educational companion tool, so the right tool for the right purpose. Where I've seen computer technology applied to music, I've seen play-along practice software that's used at our high schools. So as you're playing your instrument, you're playing along with the computer to practice tempo, for instance. More sophisticated software can read if each note is off, if it's too high or too low, and it in some instances takes the place of having a human practice partner. So I've seen that implementation. I don't have in the Next Technology for Learning plan a specific element dedicated to music, but we'll look at each curriculum area and apply squeeze the best uses out of that technology where they match the purpose in the classroom.
Other questions? I don't know if there's a question or an observation. It would occur to me that during the time we're looking to implement curriculum online, or that students can access from their Chromebooks, is there a need? I don't think there would be a need for real-time access always for every student. Would that really have to be the case, or could we be solving some of this access problem at the initial stages with flash drives that are going to have podcasts of what teacher expects them to do, or before you leave school, you're going to download whatever you need off of that assignment, and you're going to store your answers, and when you come back to school, you can communicate through the hardwired system in the school building. So do we need to ensure everybody has 2 a.m. access from home to teach?
It's our intent, and written into that white paper, is to deal with the access issue. Any good comprehensive plan is also going to have a plan B, the same way every teacher has a plan for a substitute teacher or an unexpected illness or a down computer. Right? So we're putting in layers of backup, and one of those is, just as you described, what I would call a plan B. Just in terms of the technology as it currently stands, any Google Doc that you work on can be taken into offline mode. So with some preparation, a student could take a project into offline mode. It would be stored temporarily on the computer, and if you were going to your cabin in the woods and you didn't have any access, you could work on it there. You could also start a new document. You could do a dozen things, but not 100 things that you could with access. When we went to, as we visited other districts, their Plan Bs involved jump drives with content on jump drives. They make those materials accessible out of the media center. Just anecdotally, the one math teacher we talked to, she said she used that backup plan once in the fall, and then she hadn't had to use it the rest of the year. So in the district that we were visiting, the story was, access wasn't as big an issue as we had anticipated, and our plan B was sufficient to cover the need where we saw it.
Okay. Other questions at this time? And then my traditional request then, what's our next checkpoint? What's the next thing this board is going to do and when?
Well, we'll bring back to the board on the 28th a resolution for the board to either approve or not approve a resolution for an election for next fall.
Sounds like we may not have a consensus yet. Is it the sense of the board that we simply go ahead with the discussion at the next meeting then, or do we need to have some kind of a forum for further conversation and have questions answered prior to that meeting? It's going to be given to us at a decision point. Yes, Arlene. Director Bush.
I think I've been around too long, I suppose, but we used to ask these smaller, different questions, calling ahead of the board meeting, and not doing, or at a workshop or something, but it just is getting into too much detail, I think, at a general board meeting. Because I know I've always, if I had questions, I would call the people.
All right, I just posed a question because we've heard what the schedule will be then, is to have it come to us as a resolution for a vote on the 28th. So is everyone comfortable with that, or would you like to have another procedure or level that goes on?
Further discussion at our workshop on the 20th? Is that your proposal? Or?
I'm not proposing, I'm asking.
Well, I'm going to write down the questions that I had and submit those, so perhaps my questions get answered that way.
Okay. Director Abelin, I'll put you on the spot. Do you have any further thoughts about what the procedure would be?
No, I I guess I can tell everybody, I fully intend to bring up the topic again of dividing that issue. It might go so far as making a motion to separate it, and then we have to take a vote. You mentioned the word consensus. I see no need to have a 7-0 vote on this, but I would foresee that coming up. I still think that that should be divided.
Right, that's helpful.
Well, I think we'll have some, maybe some extra discussion or questions anyway, right before we vote, right?
So as Director Hibbs suggested, we have an opportunity at a study session in the meantime. Would this be on the agenda as something we would deal with? Any questions? If there's something on your list of questions that should be shared with the board or opens up for some further discussion? We could always Moodle it, I suppose. We don't have our Chromebooks yet.
Sure.
Yes, Director Barlotta.
I just want to say, I think that we should have discussion before the meeting, because I don't think, I mean, the plan is to have us vote that night, and I don't want to have questions that can't be answered, and then we can't vote. That would not be good.
Okay, Director Bergstrom.
I don't see any reason why we can't use some time in next Monday's study session. Does that mean that we need to bring all of our panelists back? I mean, I don't know what your time frame is, what you're planning for next Monday. Mark, you'll have your questions in before you go to bed tonight, I assume.
It's 10:15, don't count on that.
As one of the panelists, it would certainly be helpful if you have questions related either to safety, security, or the referendum, to pose those so that we can address them. Whether it's 2-question or 1-question, whether it's a 7-0 vote, we've got expertise in that area, whether it's those of us on the panel or we have someone, external experts out there that can give you best case scenarios of referendums. A divided board will be a negative impact on a referendum. Referendums that are, whether you're a 5 or 7 member board, if it's not 7-0, that makes it more challenging if those that for it prevail, for us to communicate that and address that. So it will be helpful to know what your questions and issues are, so we can be prepared either next Monday, because it is the board's decision on the 28th. And I think our community is looking for and expects that decision.
Hey, Director Corman?
Yeah, I was just agreeing with what Mr. Kaufman had to say. We'll save more time if we can send our questions in advance to you, so that otherwise we're just going to take some extra time. But of course, new questions out of those answers might come out of it anyway.
Do we have time then at the study session to delve into this issue more? Our topic is budget development, is it?
Performance, isn't it?
Oh, that's right, okay. Performance measures. Yes, Director
And
Barlow.
when is Bill Morris coming? He's coming the 28th? That's correct.
There were some questions that were posed that Bill, as he's worked with this district a lot longer than many of us, can share some historical perspectives, some voting trends that he has also been doing surveys across the metro area around safety, security. I think there's some technology. He can share some insights into that.
Yes, well, I feel we need to shoehorn this onto the agenda for next time, because we're going late tonight as it is, so there's obviously some concerns, and I use the word consensus because I agree with Mr. Kaufman. It's important that we show our support. We may not get consensus, but I'd like to continue to strive for that by examining all the possible scenarios and Plan Bs that would get us there.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Director
So
Hibbs.
what's the process for submitting questions? Do we submit those to the superintendent?
Yes, please.
and then those will be shared. The answers will be shared with the board, and they will be incorporated into our next conversation, which we will have next Monday night. So we'll be sure this is on the agenda. Do we have consensus on that? Is that a good way to go? All right, then. Thank you. Appreciate you all being here, and we'll see what the schedule permits in terms of time allocated and who's going to be able to be here and wants to be here next Monday night to help us with the conversation. For our next item, we have board member reports. Is there any board member who would care to make a report on their activities since we last met? Director Bergstrom.
I'll run over these quick. I know everyone wants to get home. Had an opportunity to go to the ribbon cutting ceremony over at Valley View Elementary. They put 2 new preschool rooms on there and a conference room. That was a lot of fun to look at those little kids learning. Also had an opportunity to sit in at Normandale Hills PTSA meeting. They collected the most food in the food drive. I think it was 1,000 pounds. Is that right? Also had the, opportunity to sit in at the last PTSA council meeting, and we had the officials elected. Is that right? I'm pretty sure we did that. Want to say thanks to all the help that the PTSA people provide in all the different schools that we have. We'd be lost without you guys. Also had an opportunity to go to Beauty and the Beast over at Jefferson. Absolutely fabulous. Went over to the Bloomington Schools Elementary Art Show Awards. You can see them over at the Art Center. They're up on the 2nd floor. This is the elementary art that come from all 10 of our elementary schools, and they've chosen some that stand above and beyond the rest, and they're up there, I think, through the end of May. So go over there and see those. Stepped into Oak Grove Meadows band concert tonight. Saw their first number, sounded good. And had breakfast for dinner tonight over here down the hall, and they call that Brinner, I think. Anyways, it was a nice Belgian waffle with some fun syrup and some whipped cream. So hopefully I got it all off my face.
Thank you. Director Hibbs.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned earlier, the Community Financial Advisory Committee met. Mr. Kaufman made the safety and security presentation to them, and as I had stated earlier, they support going forward with one question on the ballot, and thought the financing plan sounded like a good approach. Labor Management also met and also saw the safety and security presentation as well as the technology presentation. And I would say again that there were a number of questions from the staff about the approach and about the financing. So I think it's appropriate that we have extended discussion about this to educate not only our staff but the public at large.
All right, thank you. Any other reports?
Okay. Yes,
Director Corman.
Yeah, I attended the Diversity Day at Jefferson High School. Lots of students, lots of energy, busy hallways. I also went to the District Curriculum Advisory Committee, and you heard the report today, so I don't think I need to say anything about that. And I just, I also was at the Valley View, the ceremony for Valley View Elementary, the ceremony for the 2 preschool rooms, the new rooms. And just want to say that I think those are wonderful additions, a job very well done, and I think everybody did a great job, the initiative and the rooms and everything. I think it was really good to be there and to see it. And that's it.
Thank you. Other reports? Then we'll have the superintendent's report.
All right, 2 things. First, administration requests a motion to establish a study session on May 20th at 7 p.m. There would be 2 topics. The first would be academic success measures, and the second would be the financing plan.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Next is an informational topic, On May 28th, the school board will host its annual celebration of service recognition and award ceremony. These are for school district employees who've worked 10 or more years, who are retiring, or who have left the school district this past year, who plan to leave this spring or summer. And the reception will begin at 5:45 in Oak Grove Middle School lunchroom, and the award ceremonies will follow at 6:30 in this room. Upon conclusion of the award ceremonies, the school board meeting will follow by a study session.
And what date?
That is on May 28th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Is there any other business that should come forward? Then we're at the end of our agenda. Meeting is adjourned.